Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Izuna Uchiha is Naruto's grandfather from Kushina's side and the Uchiha genes are dominant in Naruto part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. On Hagakure no Sato, the village hidden in the leaves, known as the greatest of the 5 great nations villages. It has been the birthplace of some of the world's strongest shinobi and is the home of some of the world's most prestigious shinobi clans. The clan regarded as the strongest in the village was the famed Uchiha clan, ruthless shinobi who, with the aid of their famous Sharingan, have made the world fear their name. One of the village's founders was an Uchiha, his name was Madara Uchiha, and he was regarded as the strongest Uchiha in the known history of Konoha. What many didn't seem to remember was that Madara had a younger brother, Izuna Uchiha, who was said to match his brother's skill. They were alive before the great villages were created in a time known as the Great Clan Wars. The Uchiha was one of the most feared clans even back then, and only one clan dared to face them. This clan was said to be rivals of the Uchiha in power and were called the Senju. The Senju clan was known just as widely as their Uchiha rivals, and their eventual strongest shinobi helped Madara found Konoha. He was Hashirama Senju, and he too had a younger brother, Tobirama Senju. Through years of constant fighting, Madara and Hashirama set aside their differences and created their great village. To Madara's distaste, however, Hashirama was chosen to lead as the first Hokage. His younger brother had lost his life to Tobirama not long before the time of Konoha, giving Madara his power. See, both brothers had awakened a forbidden Uchiha power. This power was a level up from the Sharingan. It was the Mangekyo Sharingan. It granted the wielder immense power, but its price was the Uchiha's light. Through constant use, the eyes made the user blind. There was a solution, however. You can prevent blindness by taking the Mangekyo eyes of another Uchiha. This is exactly what Madara did. He took his dying brother's eyes. This didn't just cure his blindness, but increased his power immeasurably. Madara set out for revenge, Tobirama's life for the one he took of his brothers, but Shirama stood in his way. They battled hard, but in the end it was clear to see Hashirama had bested him, and he submitted. They then made the alliance and created the Hidden Leaf Village, while all knowledge of Izuna was lost to Madara alone. Little did anyone know, Izuna had married an Uzumaki in secret and had created life with her, giving birth to a female Uzumaki that he named Kushina. Naruto. The voice of Iruka Yamino rang out, awakening the raven-haired pupil from his nap. Have you been listening to me at all? The scarred man asked in anger, his face going red as his rage built up inside. The pupil in question was 8 years old and a first-year student at the Ninja Academy. He had short spiky black hair with blood-red streaks near the tips, with short bangs framing his face. His sleepy eyes were a very dark shade of blue, from his side glance they appeared black. On each cheek he had 3 thin whisker-like birthmarks. He replied tiredly, while rolling his eyes. No, not really, sensei. Everyone gasped at the young boy, while Iruka was fuming, with steam appearing from his head. His assistant, a blue-haired man of similar height, couldn't help but snicker slightly while trying to hide it. Iruka's head suddenly grew almost 10 times its original size before he screamed. Naruto. After class you can stay and I'll be happy to teach you everything you just missed. Naruto fell out of his chair in slight fear, screaming in a girlish fashion. Aw man, now I can't get Raymond, stupid sensei. Naruto thought in his head while climbing back to his seat. The entire class laughed at the sight of the boy having to climb back to seat before Iruka turned to face them. Quiet. Everyone went pale in the face and immediately shut up. Now then, I'd like to see everyone back here on Monday so we can carry on with the history of our Lord Third and how he too was once training to be a shinobi. Don't forget to finish your homework. The entire class filed out quickly, talking in groups of friends was heard. Naruto looked on sadly, he didn't have any friends. For some reason everyone in the village hated him and parents wouldn't allow their kids to play with him. Sorry, but my daddy said I'm not supposed to talk with you. I can't play with you, my mother says you're a bad person. They were just a small portion of what the other students would say to him. 3 years ago he was even kicked out of the orphanage, the Hokage, and some Anbu had actually found him in an alleyway full of dirt and obviously starved. The Hokage was one of few people who treated him with kindness. He was like a grandfather to Naruto, and for as long as the boy can remember he took him for ramen. The old man gave him his own apartment, just a small place, but Naruto loved it. It was all his and he didn't have to share it with anyone else. The old man also gives him a monthly allowance for food, drinks and other needs. A year ago the Hokage signed him up for the academy, as Naruto had told him that it was his dream to be a shinobi. He thought he would be learning cool jutsu and how to defend himself, but no. All this place was teaching their future ninja generation was how to write lines in a notebook, and who cared what the Hokage's middle name was. How was any of this supposed to help him in a fight? This rebellious behavior landed him at the bottom of his class in terms of scores. Now don't be mistaken, Naruto was smart, surprisingly so for his age. What the problem actually was is his refusal to do anything he deems as un-ninja-like, which, above all else, meant writing in stupid textbooks. How does this help them in a fight that meant life or death? I'll stop your jutsu with my facts. Naruto accidentally said out loud sarcastically, bringing Iruka's attention straight back to him. Now then Naruto, time for you. Iruka's words sounded ominous, intimidating the poor child. Iruka was one of the typical village people. When Naruto first started attending the academy, he'd glare at him, treat him badly, and use any excuse to get him out of the class. But then Iruka had seen how lonely Naruto was. Iruka lost his parents, so he too was an orphan. He knew loneliness better than most. He realized there was no reason to hate the poor child. Slowly but surely he began treating Naruto the same way he'd treat the other students. Now that didn't mean he wouldn't discipline the boy for his antiques. But he would often treat the child to ramen the same way the Hokage would. Naruto began to see Iruka as a kind of father figure. Iruka smiled slightly before sitting in front of the child. Now then Naruto, you're smart, you could easily be one of my top students. Why don't you pay attention? Naruto stuck his tongue out before saying. Who cares about your crappy lessons? They're complete bullshit. He was cut off as Iruka comically slapped Naruto across the head, sending him head first into the table. Language Naruto. That hurt, damn it. Naruto yelled back while rubbing his head, a large lump forming hilariously fast from out of his spiky hair. Iruka began laughing, which only angered the boy more. Naruto suddenly punched him in the face, throwing the adult off of his chair. Yauk think that's funny. Iruka jumped to his feet with his large angry face, a lump of his own appearing from his hairline. The sensei kicked Naruto comically hard, throwing him into the wall at the end of the room. Why you little brat. The small boy painfully crawled back to his desk and for the second time that day, crawled back onto his chair. Now then Naruto. If you finish this work properly, I'll treat you to 5 bowls of ramen. He said with a large smile, the young boy immediately perking up with a large grin. Ramen? Yes, Iruka-sensei. He hurriedly got to work, answering all the questions Iruka asked as fast as he could without making mistakes. Yes, it's true, the only way to get past the boy's stubborn attitude is by bribing him with ramen. Iruka internally chuckled as he watched his favorite student fill in his work in record time. Hokage office. Through a secret orb kept in the Hokage's possession, the user can see practically anything in the village, simply by adding chakra to it. The orb was currently showing the events in the classroom, and the one using it was none other than Hiruzen Sarutobi, the 3rd Hokage of the Leaf Village. He was once known as the Professor, and was even the second man to attain the title of God of Shinobi. In his prime he was one of the most skilled men of his generation. He had won 2 wars, and was even trained by Tobirama himself. When the rank of Hokage was first given to him, he was but a teenager, and he was left in charge while the 2nd Hokage distracted enemy forces, sacrificing himself for the village. Well, it's true that he is far past his prime, but even in his old age he can rival any of the other Kage, and potentially still outclasses them with his skill and experience. He still deserves the title of the Professor, even if he can no longer hold onto the title of God of Shinobi. He began chuckling, happy that Naruto had someone other than him that could look out for him. Hiruzen was the one to confront Iruka, asking him not to hate Naruto for what happened all those years ago. See, the reason everyone hates Naruto is due to something that happened on the day of the boy's birth. The strongest of the 9 Bijuu, the great Kyuubi, attacked Konoha, killing hundreds. The great 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze, died facing the demon fox, sacrificing himself to seal the Bijuu inside of a young Naruto. People have since hated Naruto, wishing him death, thinking he was the demon fox that was inside of him. It's the cause of all the glares, the reason he was thrown out of the orphanage, but worst of all is what happens on his birthdays. Villagers group together in large mobs and hunt down the poor child. When they eventually catch him, they viciously beat him, calling it revenge for their fallen ones, and the next day the boy would wake up in the hospital. Hiruzen had to be present in the hospital to make sure they'll actually treat Naruto. Hiruzen knew the boy's parents. His mother was the former holder of the Kyuubi, her name was Kushina Uzumaki, but his father is the most surprising one. The father of Naruto is none other than the man who sealed the demon in his gate, Minato Namikaze. Now Hiruzen can't blame people for not noticing Naruto's relation to their savior, as for some strange reason the boy was born with pitch black hair that held the Uzumaki red in mere streaks. Most would say he resembles an Uchiha more than anything. Minato wished his son to be viewed as a hero for keeping the great fox inside of him, holding it from the demon. Well, it's safe to say that they pretty much spat on his last wish and did the complete opposite. Hiruzen made it a rule that nobody could mention the Kyuubi being in the boy, in hopes of giving him a chance with the next generation, but they just decided to keep their kids away from Naruto in other ways. Hiruzen wiped a small tear from his eyes as he realized what tomorrow was. The great tragedy happened on the 10th on October, Naruto's birthday was the 10th of October. Today was the 9th, which meant tomorrow the mobs would rise and they would surely find the poor boy. He called his Anbu down, giving them strict orders to protect the boy by all means necessary. They nodded and vanished in swirls of leaves. Before they left, the eye holes on their masks showed slight red glows. Here is inside before walking back to his desk. Looking on the desk, he began crying hysterically. Kami, help me. Too much paperwork. Streets of Konoha. Naruto had just left the raiment stand after Iruka's treat with a large smile on his face. He was walking back to his apartment while doing his best to ignore all of the glares from the villagers. He knew they hated him and deep down he hated them too. What child wouldn't hate everyone after the treatment he has had to endure all his life? He walked fearlessly, completely forgetting what tomorrow was. Right now he just wanted to get home, shower, and sleep. It had been a long day. Getting to his old crummy apartment, he quickly unlocked the door before walking in. Each time he entered he always got a little depressed. All he wanted was to be welcomed home by a mother he never had. He wanted a father to train him to be a cool ninja like all the other kids his age. But the only thing welcoming him was an empty apartment and the smell of the instant ramen he had the night before. Sighing, he locked the door and went to shower before finally heading to bed. The poor child was not ready for the next day. Naruto woke up to the sound of shouting and cheering. He tiredly opened his eyes and tried to move but found that he couldn't. Something was stopping him, restraining him. Once his eyes adjusted, he gasped. He was tied to a wooden post and in front of him stood a large group of angry villagers. So the demon awakens. A large man called, gaining the entire mob's attention. Naruto could see they were holding all types of weapons, from knives to pitchforks, some actually had large metal pipes. What's going on? He tried to ask, not understanding what was happening. He had just woken up to this and he was confused and extremely scared. Another villager decided to speak up with a twisted smile. You don't remember? Today is the anniversary of your attack, you monster. They yelled angrily, waving their weapon at him. Naruto's eyes opened wider as it finally hit him. They only did this much once a year when they thought they could get away with such a thing. That day unfortunately happened to be Naruto's birthday. The man punched the poor boy in his stomach, knocking the breath out of his chest and causing him to spit blood. Please stop. I didn't do anything. He begged, but it only seemed to fuel their anger as another one stabbed his weak arm, causing blood to leak out. Naruto let out a loud scream of pain while other villagers began to join in on the fun as they called it. What's going on here? A voice asked from behind the crowd. Everyone turned and immediately froze. The man it belonged to was dressed in ninja clothing. "We can explain," one villager began to say, but the shinobi interrupted him with a sickening smile. "Beating on the demon without even inviting me?" The mob suddenly began cheering while making room for the ninja. Naruto began screaming in fear as the man stared at him in anger. He suddenly began doing hand signs while glaring at the restricted boy. "You're going to die, demon. Water style. Water dragon jutsu." The puddles of water began to rise from the ground quickly, forming a large monster serpent of water. Its yellow eyes glared at Naruto, who in turn began to panic in pure fear. It lunged for him, but before it could get anywhere close, two black figures jumped in the way holding up hand signs of their own, exhaling huge fireballs that engulfed the water dragon, turning it to mere steam, while the fire carried on past the rivaling jutsu and reduced the villagers and ninja to ash. The shorter one turned to Naruto, throwing shuriken towards him and cutting the rope. He dropped to the floor, on his knees gasping in pain. When he looked up, the two Anbu took a step back. Naruto could clearly see their eyes. They were the Sharingan, the Kurai bloodline of the Uchiha. What he couldn't understand was why they took a step back. He looked down into the puddle and his eyes widened. Naruto gasped. There in his eye sockets were two Sharingan eyes with a single comma in each. Before he could say anything, he suddenly collapsed due to blood loss from the wound on his arm. His last thought before he fell unconscious being the simple word, "Whoa." One day later, Konoha Hospital. Naruto's eyes began to open slowly, the blinding light of the hospital ceiling momentarily blinding him. He could barely remember the night before, everything seemed foggy. When his eyes had adjusted properly, he looked around to see the old man talking to some teenagers he had never seen before. The shortest one had long brownish hair in a thin ponytail at the back. He had black eyes and strange lines under them. He was wearing a high-collared blue shirt and matching trousers. The one next to him was slightly taller and appeared to be a little older. He had short black hair in a somewhat curly, unruly style. His eyes too were black and he had a kind smile on his face. He wore an identical shirt to the first one but wore dark brown trousers. The Hokage was dressed in his usual robes and was talking to the two teenagers about something he couldn't hear. As he began trying to eavesdrop, he saw the shortest one looking at him. "So you're awake?" The other two heard his words and turned to see Naruto with an embarrassed look on his face. The Hokage flashed him a warm smile. "Ah, Naruto, my boy, you had a long rest. How are you feeling?" Naruto smiled at Hiruzen, warming the old man's heart. "I'm okay, old man." Naruto shouted, still not remembering what had happened the night before. "Good good. Naruto, I would like to introduce you to Shisui Uchiha and Itachi Uchiha." Naruto smiled his typical huge grin at both of them and waved. Shisui had a kind-hearted smile on his face, while Itachi flashed a small smile too. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Naruto," Itachi said formally, nodding his head slightly. Shisui grinned while speaking with an enthusiastic tone. "Whoa, sweet hair, I'm digging it." Naruto grinned even more. These two teenagers weren't being mean to him or even ignoring him as most villagers did. They seemed genuinely nice. "They are both shinobi, Naruto, some of my best in fact," Hiruzen said, knowing how Naruto would react to that. "So cool. And you're not even that old. You're awesome," Naruto said loudly, bouncing in his hospital bed. He accidentally fell out of his bed and landed on his arm. Wincing in pain, he noticed the slight blood on the bandages, and suddenly, just like that, the memories from last night began flowing into his head. Old man. There's something I need to tell you. Yesterday was my birthday, and you know what happens on my birthdays, and then a ninja came and he made this big scary dragon of water, but then these two other guys jumped down out of nowhere and fired the hugest fireballs I'd ever seen. Then the cool ninja dudes cut me down and they had masks and the Sharingan. But then I looked into a puddle and saw that I had it too. I had the Sharingan." The two Uchiha were chuckling together while Hiruzen had a grandfatherly smile. "They are the two ninja that saved you, Naruto. And for some reason you do have the Uchiha bloodline. That is why I'm having them both train you to use it. You will still attend the academy, however. They will not stop until they think you are ready, and you will refer to them as your senseis. Is that understood, Naruto?" Naruto was lost for words. Two teenagers had saved him and they were going to teach him to use their bloodline. "Your training will be tough, Naruto, you better keep up," Itachi said, activating his Sharingan. Shisui nodded while smiling before he too activated his eyes. "Yes, Itachi-sensei," Naruto replied, feeling a burst of his chakra go straight to his eyes. Hiruzen couldn't believe what he was seeing. Naruto lifted his head, revealing his activated Sharingan eyes. Training with the two Uchihas was, for lack of better words, torture. He'd been learning from them for less than a month and he was beginning to regret awakening the Sharingan. Within the first training session it started off interesting. They taught him how to channel chakra to his eyes to switch his Sharingan on and off, and even checked his affinity by channeling chakra into special chakra paper. It had 3 separate reactions. First it split in 2 pieces indicating a wind chakra nature, but then one side burnt to ash, while the other crumbled up into a ball. According to his senseis, this meant that Naruto had not 1, not 2 even, but 3 chakra natures. They were wind, fire, and lightning. Then it got to the torture. Itachi made him wear weights on his arms and legs, making the poor child unable to move, and told Naruto he was to wear them everywhere and never take them off, before ordering him to run laps around the entire training ground, then push-ups, and then punches and kicks. He almost passed out the first day. Shisui made Naruto spar with him for 30 minutes each day, and he was not holding back. He made Naruto activate his Sharingan and told him to focus and predict his movements and attacks. Needless to say, Naruto went home with a lot of bruises. He was also given a wooden sword to train with, teaching him the basics and correcting him strictly whenever he made the slightest mistakes. Itachi was also drilling knowledge into the boy's head, and information and intellect was just as useful as jutsu, if not more so. Then they told him to meditate for 3 hours a day after training to help build chakra reserves and give him some chakra control. After the first 2 weeks he felt stronger and was beginning to get used to his weights. He had also been attending the academy and had not missed a single day. Iruka was sure someone was pretending to be Naruto as he had been working a lot harder in classes. It was true he'd been paying more attention, mostly because Itachi would be mad if he found out and he scared Naruto. Surprisingly, Naruto had actually made 2 new friends. The first was a boy slightly taller than him with light blue hair and bright purple eyes. He had strange shark-like teeth and liked to wear sleeveless shirts for some reason. He was originally from the Mist Village, but his family were seeking refuge from the civil war back home and the Hokage gracefully took them in. His name was Shinsu Kazuki and he was the first to make friends with Naruto. Being from the Mist Village, people didn't trust his family and therefore didn't trust him. He related to Naruto and decided to befriend the boy. Not long after Shinsuke and Naruto became friends, another boy approached them. He had short black hair and the typical wide eyes of a Hyuga. He had a strange green seal on his forehead but refused to cover it as covering it would mean I'm even more caged than I already am when Naruto asked. He was a little shorter than the other 2. He had made friends with them as he disliked the other members of their class as they were too loud. His name was Takiro Hyuga. Naruto was happy he now had friends to hang out with and play with. They didn't judge him like everyone else and didn't seem to care that all the glares began to turn to them too for being the demon's friends. The three boys would often hang out in empty training grounds or at the Hokage monument. They would often talk about their dreams and goals as future shinobi. Shinsuke wished to be as skilled as the 7 ninja swordsmen back at the Mist Village and hopefully see an end to all the fighting back home. You could see the determination in his eyes. As a side dream he would like to wield one of their blades. The Kiro wished to free the branch family of the Hyuga from the seal that is implanted on all of their foreheads from a young age, which is used by the main family to inflict immense pain upon the branch family members should they step out of line. Naruto had told them that he would like to be strong enough to fight on par with a Kage and change what people think of him, and he would like to master the Sharingan to just see the reactions people will have when they find out he has Uchiha blood. The boys kept no secrets from each other and were closer than most brothers were. Hiruzen was proud of how much Naruto had progressed and it warmed his heart to see him with friends his own age. He was at the top of his classes now and Hiruzen knew that the boy had a lot of potential. Naruto walked into his usual training ground to see his two senseis there waiting for him. No words had to be spoken as Naruto immediately got to work on his laps while Shisui and Itachi spoke together. He has progressed so well in just a month and he still has 4 years before graduating the academy. By then we'll have created an almost perfect shinobi. He has skill, power and knowledge. Qualities like those are hard to come by these days, even among most chunin. Shisui said, praising their student with a small smile. Itachi merely nodded while watching Naruto. The boy had gained a lot of speed in such a short amount of time. If he were to remove his weights, he could definitely keep up with almost any chunin and maybe even some jounin. It was surprising to say the least. He had gotten better with the Sharingan too and could actually follow Shisui's movements to a certain degree. Naruto was just finishing his laps and was about to start on press-ups when Itachi spoke up. Naruto, you are somehow able to use the Sharingan, which means somewhere in you there's Uchiha blood. Activate it for me and watch closely. I am about to teach you the hand signs for a jutsu that all members of our clan learn. Naruto nodded while flaring his Sharingan to life. Itachi did them at a fast pace, but Naruto was able to follow the hand signs with little difficulty. Focus your chakra into your lungs and heat it up. When you think you have it right, exhale. Like this. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. From Itachi's mouth burst a large flaming fireball, like a miniature sun, flowing forward and incinerating a nearby training dummy. Naruto's eyes twinkled slightly at the sight. With a nod of approval from Itachi, Naruto began going through the hand signs. Itachi and Shisui were both shocked at the speed Naruto was going through them at. It was unheard of for an academy student's first try, but he made no mistakes. Taking a deep breath, Naruto aimed at a dummy next to the first. Here goes. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. From Naruto's mouth erupted a huge fireball, close to the size of Itachi's, burning towards the dummy with extraordinary speed. It burnt the wooden mannequin to ash, like Itachi's did to the first one. Looking up, Naruto saw both of his senseis with wide-eyed looks. He grinned sheepishly while rubbing the back of his head. Well done Naruto, first try as well. Looks like we have another Uchiha prodigy over here. Shisui said enthusiastically while patting his student's head. He was proud of the young boy and deep down he knew that Itachi was too even if he was remaining emotionless. For your good work I'm going to teach you one more new jutsu. Watch closely with your Sharingan again. Shadow Clone Jutsu. In a puff of smoke appeared 2 more copies of Shisui. This jutsu allows you to create physical clones of yourself, but that isn't the only trick. When you dispel a clone, the memories of that clone are transferred back to you, making it the excellent training jutsu for someone with high reserves. Now you try. Naruto was grinning, he was learning another jutsu. Holding up the single hand sign he focused his chakra. Shadow Clone Jutsu. A huge amount of smoke filled the training ground, blinding everyone there temporarily. When the smoke cleared, both Uchihas almost had a heart attack. Naruto had summoned over 100 clones. They were all perfect, no slight or major deformities among them. Okay Naruto. Back to training. Split into 4 groups and each group will focus on one of your training exercises, be it press-ups, punches and kicks, sparring, or chakra control. Get to it. Shisui commanded. Each Naruto saluted to him before replying in complete unison. Yes, Shisui-sensei. And getting to work. Itachi whispered to Shisui quietly. This boy has the potential to surpass even us. He masters jutsu first time, progresses faster than any regular shinobi his age or far older. I can't wait to see the ninja he becomes after graduation. He had a small smile on his face. Not that he'd admit it, but he liked training Naruto, the boy was a breath of fresh air. 2 years later, Naruto had grown, not just physically. His intelligence was close to Inara's. He now had a fully matured Sharingan in both eyes, something he was proud of. His senseis had called off training for the day, so he was lost for things to do. His chakra control had come a long way, despite not being a sensory ninja, he could rather easily spot out most shinobi when they were hiding. But the use of shadow clones, his training skyrocketed. He had practically mastered the use of his sword, and Shisui had actually gifted him a real katana. He was above Chunin level in terms of speed, and that was without removing his weights. He had a large arsenal of jutsu under his belt too. Shisui and Itachi took advantage of his skill at mastering jutsu, and he had been taught practically every fire jutsu in the village and Uchiha jutsu libraries. He learned to channel chakra through his blade too, increasing its damage. He had some new lightning and wind jutsu to go along with his fire ones, and it was safe to say he was the most dangerous 10-year-old in the village. Shisui had even taught him his all-famous variation of the Shunshin teleportation jutsu, which he had practically mastered in a little over a week. Itachi had been teaching him strong jinjutsu and had already taught the boy to break them with the use of his chakra. Naruto could now cast them with his Sharingan alone. Itachi also allowed him to sign the crow summoning contract, as it would be a useful tool in the future. His aim with throwing weapons at first was awful, he had almost impaled Itachi once, and he was standing far behind the boy. It quickly improved to the point he was the top of his class at that as well. He even added his chakra natures to his kunai and shuriken for added speed and damage. They taught him the Uchiha Taijutsu style, the interceptor fist, as they didn't want the boy to be killed the first time he drops his sword. Surprisingly, he managed to work the shadow clones around him into taijutsu combinations, acting as a team on his own. He even incorporated jinjutsu whenever he made eye contact with his opponent, like a true Uchiha. The Hokage was impressed with Naruto's skill, but was sad to see something change in the boy. He became more serious and was never happy until he was training. He lost the goofy attitude and the large grins. The most he'd do was a small arrogant Uchiha-like smirk. That was enough thinking about Naruto, he had something else he had to deal with. For a long time now the Uchiha and the people of Konoha had began to drift apart. Trust between the two had disappeared completely. This started when Tobirama, through his paranoia towards the Uchiha, forced them to live on the outskirts and strip them of power, rendering them to nothing but a simple police force. Hiruzen had begun making progress by trying to mend their differences in hopes of keeping their alliance, but that all ended when the Kyuubi attacked the village. Villagers and shinobi alike had claimed that they saw Sharingan in the fox's eye, and of course the Uchiha didn't take kindly to this accusation. Itachi and Shisui had informed him of something that made him sad however. The clan was planning a coup d'etat on the village. Planning to kill everyone standing in their way and take the seat of Hokage by force. Naruto's two senseis had been working as spies for the Hokage, and they had told him the attack would be soon. He had been hoping to avoid confrontation and had planned for Shisui to hopefully change their minds. Shisui had awakened the next form of the Sharingan, the Mangekyo Sharingan, and with it came a powerful jinjutsu. This jinjutsu could implant false memories into one's head without them ever realizing, he called it Kodamatsukami. One of his advisors, Danzu, had disapproved immediately, the snake. He was just trying to take the seat for himself, and Hiruzen knew it. The crippled man had told Hiruzen that they needed to deal with traitors with force, recommending that they wipe the entire clan out. Hiruzen had said that should his plan fail, they would have no other choice but to go along with that plan, but had hoped it wouldn't come to it. The day was the day, he had Shisui in front of him with his Sharingan activated, ready for his mission. He would meet Itachi at a secret rendezvous should something go wrong, but he had confidence in himself. Shisui, you know what's at stake. Should you fail I will have no other choice but to annihilate the Uchiha clan. I trust you. Go. In the swirl of leaves the shinobi vanished and began making the trip to his clan. Suddenly he saw someone stood in the way staring at him with a single eye. He knew this man and he didn't trust him. Danzu. What can I do for you? I really should get moving. The man just looked at him with his cold single eye. Shisui Uchiha. Your Sharingan is powerful, even more so than Itachi's. You will be using your famed Kodamatsukami on Fugaku, yes? Shisui was on edge, something didn't feel right here. He began walking past Danzu. The crippled man suddenly reached for his face, making Shisui widen his eyes in shock. Danzu was close to reaching for his eye when Shisui made eye contact. Danzu suddenly froze, unable to move a muscle. That jinjutsu will only be temporary, when you finally break out I should be long go. Danzu suddenly vanished from existence, putting Shisui on edge. He felt a strong grip on his throat suddenly, looking forward he could see that the hand belonged to Danzu. However before he could react, the crippled man ripped out his left eyes, causing the young Uchiha to scream in pain. The bandages around the man's face suddenly fell as he pushed the Sharingan eye in place. Shisui created some distance quickly, but surrounding Danzu was a large group of his root Anbu. They immediately fired off dozens of water jutsu. Responding quickly, Shisui flashed through hand signs and stopped each of the oncoming jutsu with a single fireball. The jutsu clash kicked up a large cloud of steam and when it vanished Shisui was nowhere to be seen. Follow him. Don't let him escape. The root Anbu disappeared, following the young Uchiha. When they caught up to him he was in a clearing and facing them head-on. His good eye suddenly bled as his chakra flared drastically. The route didn't seem to notice as they closed a gap, and that was their last mistake. Susanoo. A large green body of chakra appeared around Shisui. It had a knight-like helmet and looked to be armored. It was wielding a large drill-like weapon, which it swung, slicing all of the root members to pieces in one go. The chakra body suddenly disappeared as Shisui dropped to one knee, before he vanished in a blur. Itachi was already waiting at their meeting place. He figured something must have happened as Shisui was late and in the end never arrived at the Uchiha clan district. He felt someone behind him and turned to look at his best friend. His eyes suddenly widened as he saw Shisui missing an eye and bleeding heavily. Shisui. What happened? He ran to his friend's side to see if there was anything he could do to help. Your Sharingan. Danzu took it. He doesn't trust me and wants to cough. He wants something from our clan. I don't know what. Don't trust him, Itachi. He has spies everywhere. Shisui was panting heavily and could barely get those words out. He then reached to his face, removing his last eye. Take this, Itachi, you are the only one I trust. The fate of our clan is in your hands. A crow appeared out of nowhere and took the eye, bring it to its homeland so it could be safe. Itachi looked worried, as if he was holding back tears. Shisui smiled at him while standing up. He began walking backwards slowly, and by the time Itachi realized what he was doing it was too late. Shisui fell backwards off of the cliffside, and Itachi ran to catch him but was too late. Shisui. He called as he watched his best friend fall to his death. All the pain he felt and the anger towards Danzu, it sparked something in him. His eyes began to burn as chakra began flowing to them in large amounts. His Sharingan began to morph into something new. It began to look like a three-sided shuriken instead of his usual three commas. Small trickles of blood fell from his cold, dead eyes. He knew what had just happened and his new mission. He had just awakened the famous Mangekyo Sharingan and his new mission. Kill the Uchiha. A few days later, Naruto was walking through the streets of Konoha and it was getting dark. There weren't many people walking around at this time, which he liked. It gave him a break from the usual glares and whispers that he has had to deal with almost all of his life. It made him question why he'd ever protect them when they would never do the same for him, but he banished those thoughts quickly. He would protect the village for the few people he cared about. The nice people at the ramen shop, Iruka-sensei, Shinsuke, Takiro, the old man, Itachi and Shisui. He had to admit that most of the Hokage's Anbu were nicer to him than most and had often jumped to his protection from his beatings. When he was younger he remembered a white-haired Anbu operative who used to watch over him almost all day every day. He never got his name, but he remembered his aura and gravity-defying hair. As he was walking he noticed someone running. He had dark hair and a similar shirt to his sensei's, in fact he looked a lot like Itachi. He remembered this boy from his class as Sasuke, a snot-nosed brat. He was spoiled and arrogant despite being next to nothing. He hadn't even awakened the Sharingan and he was 10. Considering he had nothing else to do today he decided to follow the boy as he had never actually been in the Uchiha district despite being trained by two of their most respected members. Sasuke seemed to be stressing about something, but before he could figure out what it was an awful smell reached his nose. He had bled enough in his short life to remember what it smelled like. They hadn't reached the district yet, but the smell was potent and almost knocking Naruto sick. He was surprised that Sasuke couldn't seem to smell it yet. He decided to keep his guard up. If something were to happen, he would have to defend himself and Sasuke, as the boy wasn't as skilled as he liked to make out. Sasuke ran through his district gates. The streets were empty and the lights were off. That's weird, it's not that late, is it? People usually have their lights on, there's no way everyone can be asleep at this time. He muttered to himself as he began walking. Naruto was walking across the rooftops and masking his chakra as best he could, thanking his senseis for his training. He suddenly froze as he felt someone looking at him. It was like a sixth sense for Naruto, as he grew up with stairs. He looked up and could have sworn he saw a shadowy figure disappear out of existence. Before he could investigate further, he heard Sasuke scream. Immediately jumping down he turned the corner and almost threw up. Surrounding Sasuke were dozens of corpses. They looked like Uchiha, from the shirts and hair. There was blood everywhere. Naruto stayed just out of sight, so Sasuke didn't notice him. Sasuke was panicking like crazy, he didn't know what was happening. Suddenly a thought came into his head. Mother. Father. He immediately took off running towards his house, Naruto tailing him at a safe distance. As he was running, Sasuke saw more and more bodies of people he knew, children and adults alike were littering the streets. This can't be happening, Sasuke muttered quietly while running. Once he got to his house he had to take a deep breath, he was terrified of what he might see. He opened the door to the entrance of his large house while taking his shoes off. He ran through his house in hopes of finding his parents alive. He got to the last door and you could see the fear on his face. He was shaking and sweat was pouring down his face. With one strong push he opened the door and almost puked instantly. His parents were there, dead on the floor in a pool of their own blood. Sasuke began to tear up, but a glimmer of hope entered them as he saw the figure behind them. Itachi. As something happened to mother and father, someone. Sasuke was cut off as a shuriken passed open and embedded itself into the door. Suddenly his shoulder gained a slash mark and blood pooled out slowly. I Itachi. I did it to test my own powers. Itachi said out of nowhere, scaring Sasuke. You are weak. Suddenly Itachi's Sharingan morphed into the Mangekyo Sharingan as he casted a Genjutsu on his younger brother. He forced Sasuke to watch as he killed each and every Uchiha he found. Sasuke began screaming as tears poured down his face. So many were getting slaughtered before his eyes. Then it got worse. He watched as Itachi killed his parents. And then the entire thing played over again, and when it ended it repeated again and again. It was breaking his brother, and he knew it. Itachi then left the house, leaving Sasuke on the floor screaming. As he began to leave the district, he stopped. He heard someone land behind him, but without turning he knew who it was. You shouldn't be here, Naruto. Itachi's tone was cold, but Naruto knew it was forced. Why are you doing this? Where's Shisui-sensei? Naruto questioned, while keeping his guard up. Itachi may care about him, but Naruto knew something was up. There was a reason why Itachi was doing what he was doing. Shisui is dead. Naruto froze. A small tear fell from his eye as he registered what Itachi had just told him. I killed him so I could reach the next stage of the Sharingan. Naruto's heart skipped a beat as he watched Itachi's Sharingan slowly morph into the three-sided shuriken that was his Mangekyo. To gain these eyes you must kill your best friend. And I wanted the power. Now watch him die, Naruto. He casted a Genjutsu over Naruto and made him watch a false reality where Itachi stabbed Shisui in the back. Naruto tried to break the Genjutsu, but for some reason it wouldn't budge. Only the Mangekyo Sharingan can break free from the effects of Tsukuyomi. In this realm I control time and space, and you will be kept here for 24 hours watching the same events on repeat, and it will last but a second in the real world. Now break Naruto. Naruto's anger and hatred were rising uncontrollably. Shisui was one of his closest people. He couldn't have just lost one of the only people that accepted him. His chakra flared to his eyes, the hurt was fueling his anger. No, how dare you kill Shisui? Naruto screamed as his Sharingan began to morph, shocking Itachi. It became what appeared to be two scythes crossing over each other, with their hilts joining together at the bottom. Tsukuyomi began to crack up before it shattered like glass. Itachi watched as Naruto collapsed to the ground, his eyes changing back to the Sharingan and then back to his normal eyes. You will be the one to kill me it seems, Naruto, as you already have my eyes. Goodbye Naruto. He disappeared in a burst of crows, leaving the village as the man who massacred his clan and labeled as an S-rank rogue ninja. Naruto and Sasuke were left unconscious in the Uchiha district for the Hokage's Anbu to find. Hiruzen was shocked to find Naruto there, but had to be proud as he figured the boy followed Sasuke in order to protect him. I'm sorry Itachi, and to you Naruto, I am sorry as well. The world was dark for Naruto, all he could see were glimpses of Itachi killing Shisui over and over again. It can't be true, he had told himself that repeatedly, as if it would somehow change what happened, but it never did. He knew he had to accept it, but he couldn't. Shisui was dead, and Itachi was the one to kill him. He was missing something, but the only one who had the answers was Itachi, and he didn't seem to want to share. Slowly Naruto's eyes began to open, slowly adjusting to the bright white ceiling of the hospital room. How did I get here? I suppose Anbu found me, I wonder Sasuke is. Naruto began to sit up slowly, still lightheaded from his long rest. He shakily got to his feet, almost falling at first. His room was empty. No Hokage, he said to himself. He glanced towards the door and decided to go find his fellow Uchiha. He was walking slowly and had to hold onto things to prevent him from falling, while in his stomach he felt a need to puke. As he left the room he saw people walking around, some nurses going along with their daily tasks, and some family members were just visiting the hospital. Naruto rolled his eyes, he hated to think about people's families, as he had never known what a family was like, it just annoyed him. He began to get feeling back into his legs as he began walking towards the next room. As he got to the door of the room however, he heard people talking. There were students from his class there, along with their families. He sighed and decided to enter. Immediately he received looks. The students and their mothers were glaring at him, while one of the fathers, a blonde man, just gave him a sympathetic look. Naruto glared back a lot harder, making them take a step back. Get out. Naruto said in a commanding tone. His chakra was flaring up. The blonde man widened his eyes and didn't know whether to intervene or not. So he is a shinobi. Naruto figured, taking notice of the man's reaction. Perhaps we should listen to him, we can come back tomorrow. The man said, calming Naruto down slightly. His obvious daughter, a snobby brat in Naruto's eyes, attempted to refuse. But dad or father quickly cut her off. We need to get back to work anyway, let's go. The students huffed in disappointment before following the man out of the room. Naruto ignored the glares they were sending his way while approaching Sasuke. The boy appeared to be unconscious still, but Naruto didn't wish to waste time. I know you are awake, I want answers. Now. Naruto again had that commanding tone. Slowly the Uchiha opened his eyes, glaring at Naruto. They are gone. It's just me. Sasuke visibly relaxed before looking back to Naruto. Why would I tell you anything? He had a cold, uninterested tone, as if Naruto wasn't good enough for him to talk to. Naruto sighed before flaring his chakra to his eyes. I'd have preferred not to do this. Sasuke gasped in surprise and shock. Naruto was glaring back at him with those eyes, the eyes that haunted him, the eyes that were his birthright, yet out of reach for him for unknown reasons, the Sharingan. Now, will you give me answers? Naruto said coldly. Sasuke was trying to find reasons for his fellow student to have those eyes, but couldn't think of anything. Then it hit him. Black hair Itachi training him, you're an Uchiha. Sasuke blasted out, making Naruto facepalm. Not so loud, idiot. That is classified information, I could have you killed just for knowing it. Sasuke went even paler than usual, sinking into his bed. Now then, for my answers. Why did Itachi kill the entire clan? Sasuke widened his eyes. You were there, weren't you? Sasuke replied with a question of his own. I was tailing you, as I had gotten bored. Now answer my question or I will finish what Itachi started. Naruto had a cold aura around him, making the poor Uchiha almost want to puke. He shook his head to clear his mind quickly. He told me it was to test his own power. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Itachi-sensei would never do such a thing, but he isn't lying, so he just doesn't know. Naruto concluded in his head before moving on to his next question. Had Itachi and Shisui grown apart at all? Sasuke looked confused before shaking his head to say no. They were well-known friends among the village. Naruto seemed to know this already, however. Was there any infighting between the clan and Itachi himself? Yes. The other day 3 men came to the door for Itachi, I heard arguing, and rushed out to see what happened. The 3 men were on the floor and Itachi was angry about something. Then father arrived and broke things up, but Itachi and father seemed to have a standoff. I screamed for Itachi to stop and then Sasuke suddenly stopped talking, as if he wanted to mention something, but didn't know if he could. And then? Naruto asked, encouraging the boy to tell him what happened. Itachi's Sharingan looked different from usual. Kind of like a shuriken. Naruto knew what this was. On the night he remembered Itachi telling him of the Mangekyo Sharingan, a next stage for the Sharingan. Naruto then deactivated the Sharingan before heading towards the door. Do not tell anyone of my Sharingan. Sasuke nodded quickly and Naruto left. He exited the hospital through a window in his room, uninterested in a conversation with the checkout nurse. He was going to head home and think of what he had learned and what had happened. As he neared his house he saw the door open. Someone entered my home. He was immediately on guard. Quickly activating his Sharingan he slowly and silently entered his apartment. Walking towards his table he could hear and feel nothing and no one. Deactivate your Sharingan, Naruto. From behind him came the elderly voice of the Hokage. Quickly turning he could see the old man sitting on his couch and looking at him. What can I do for you, Lord Hokage? Naruto said in a professional tone. Hiruzen took notice of the lack of disrespect the old Naruto used to have. He never used to refer to him as the Hokage, it was always old man back when he was young. He seemed to have gained a more ninja-like mindset, likely from Itachi. The hospital nurses informed me of your escape from the hospital. You didn't check out. He spoke in a caring manner, but Naruto just shrugged it off. He was not in the mood right now for small talk. Why did Itachi do what he did? Hiruzen was caught off guard. He must have snapped from the continual stress of a shinobi. The Hokage attempted to lie, but Naruto could see right through it. Activating his Sharingan and glaring at the old man, he spoke again. We both know that isn't true. Now tell me the truth. Naruto could sense the Anbu around him, ready to intervene should things get out of hand. Sighing, the Hokage lowered his head. Calm down, Naruto. As Naruto was about to refuse, Hiruzen showed him why after all these years he was still the Hokage. He released a powerful burst of chakra, forcing Naruto to his knees. Naruto had widened eyes, he was in utter shock to feel how much power the Hokage had. However, something inside of Naruto awakened. A large burst of powerful demonic chakra burst from Naruto. His pupils became slits and his teeth sharpened. His whisker marks thickened and his nails grew into claws. The chakra released almost rivaled the Hokage's and put the Anbu on edge. Before anything could happen, however, Naruto felt a powerful hand on the back of his neck. Looking back, Naruto came face to face with an oldish-looking man with long white hair. Under his eyes were thin red markings and he had an annoyingly arrogant grin on his face. Naruto, this is Jiraiya. Your godfather. Naruto's eyes widened in shock after hearing the Hokage's words. The demonic chakra began to fade and the Anbu agent sighed in relief. Get your Anbu out of my apartment. Naruto said coldly, lowering his head as he glared at the ground. Everyone present was surprised that Naruto could pick up on the Anbu's presence, they were trained to be ghosts after all. Snapping his fingers, the Hokage dismissed his agents. Naruto felt them leave before looking back at Hiruzen. The old man took that as his cue to begin talking. Naruto. It is time you learned the truth. Naruto was shocked beyond belief, but remained quiet. 10 years ago something happened, something that changed our village forever. The nine-tailed fox demon attacked our village, out of nowhere. We were severely unprepared, and it was wreaking havoc in the village. As we were losing hope, the fourth Hokage entered the battle to confront the beast himself. However, you cannot kill a tailed beast, as they are pure manifestations of chakra. So he did the next best thing. Living his life, he sealed the fox inside of a baby. He couldn't seal it into an adult, as their chakra system was already fully grown and would be unable to adjust to suit such a powerful beast. A baby, however, would be able to handle it, as they would have time for their chakra system to grow to suit the demon's powerful chakra. This is where it concerns you, however. The baby that our beloved fourth Hokage sealed the demon into Naruto cut him off angrily. It was me. His eyes were widened, and slowly he could feel his respect for the man vanish, replaced with utter hatred. He's the one who cursed me. He is the reason that everyone hates me. Naruto quickly calmed himself down quickly, realizing that the source of his power that he released before was from the demon. It must be fueled by his anger somehow. He wished for you to be seen as a hero, Naruto. The Hokage tried to defend his fallen successor, only to receive a glare from Naruto. Yeah, and I wished for a family. Wishes are for fools. Jiraiya had remained silent up until now, but listening to this was beginning to get to him. Look, brat, the fourth Hokage is twice the shinobi you'll ever be. He put the village first. Naruto rolled his eyes at the old man before turning away from him. We're done here. I have the academy in the morning, so I would like to rest. Naruto said quietly, loud enough for the two men to hear. Jiraiya wanted to stay, but one look from the Hokage told him not to resist. The two men left quietly, Naruto refusing to look at either of them. Walking to his room, he looked at his dresser. On the top were two pictures. The first was of Naruto, Shinsuke and Takiro, and the second one was a picture of Naruto, Itachi and Shisui, all with their sharingans activated and matching grins. He heard a fluttering of wings behind him. Turning, he saw crows fluttering over his bed before leaving quickly. On his bed were three objects: an Uchiha shirt, a jutsu scroll, and another scroll with the words Uchiha clan jutsu written over the top. Still teaching me even after you leave the village, Itachi. What really happened, he said in his head, sighing deeply. He stored the shirt away, not wishing to reveal his secrets just yet. He closed his window before lying down on his bed and closing his eyes. One thing he knew was that he needed to get stronger to find Itachi, for he was the only one with the answers he wanted. The next day was a typical academy day. He found himself walking to the academy, meeting his two friends and the doors. Finally, you're here, Naruto. Thought we'd have to come looking for you. Shinsuke said cheerfully with his typical grin. Naruto couldn't help but smile slightly. We're almost late for class. Hopefully Iruka-sensei isn't too harsh with us this time. Takiro said with a small smirk on his face as he turned to walk. Naruto scoffed slightly at the thought of Iruka not being harsh. As if. The group quickly arrived at their classroom door and sighed in relief that they couldn't see Iruka or Mizuki anywhere in the classroom, and entered quickly to find their seats. Sasuke watched Naruto through the corner of his eyes as the boy walked in. So far everyone had been talking to Sasuke, asking how he was and if he was okay. It was beginning to make him wish that Itachi killed him too. Suddenly everyone looked up to the door as their senseis entered, followed by a pale boy dressed in black. Naruto saw the boy looking at him intensely, deciding to keep the boy at a distance. He had black hair and what appeared to be a notepad and paintbrush hanging slightly out of his backpack. Something about him is unnerving, and I have never seen him before. I should watch him and find out what he wants. Naruto thought in his head, but couldn't dwell on it any further as Iruka spoke up. Hello class. Today we're going to be doing Taijutsu sparring. I will put you into randomized pairs of two and you will spar outside for the class to watch. No ninjutsu or genjutsu is allowed during these spars. And we have a new student joining us today. Would you like to introduce yourself? The boy had an annoyingly fake smile plastered on his face, making most of the class members uncomfortable. Hello, my name is Sai, nice to meet you all. His voice held almost no emotion. It kind of reminded Naruto of how Itachi was during training. In fact, it was like all of the Anbu that Naruto had heard speak to. He has had training elsewhere. And he certainly isn't a student. Naruto was really on edge about this new kid and he could tell that Takiro was having similar thoughts. Shinsuke wasn't exactly the sharpest tool in the box, however. Okay class, please follow me out into the training grounds. Iruka ordered before walking back out of the doors. Mizuki followed right behind him along with Sai. The rest of the class gathered their bags and quickly followed after their teachers. As they got outside, they noticed Iruka and Mizuki standing in front of a large circle. The fight is over when your opponent gives up, leaves the ring, or when we call it. I will call out two of you and you will step inside the circle before showing that it is a spar. By doing this, Iruka and Mizuki stuck their middle and index fingers out before wrapping them around each other's fingers. Okay, first up. Sasuke Uchiha and Takiro Hyuga. Sasuke smirked, while Takiro remained silent as they both entered the circle. Sasuke settled into the Uchiha interceptor fist stance, while Takiro dropped into his gentle fist stance. Haruka sighed when they didn't make the peaceful gesture, but figured he'd get the students to work on it. Both boys charged at each other, with Sasuke attempting to get onto the offensive by throwing a quick punch to the boy's face, but he underestimated Takiro's speed. The punch hit thin air as Takiro dropped under the outstretched arm before planting both hands into the Uchiha's stomach. Sasuke went to drop backwards, but Takiro continued his onslaught. He gripped Sasuke's wrist, pulling him up into an open palm strike, hitting him in the chest. Takiro then span quickly before releasing the boy, throwing him directly over the circle's edge. Sasuke's fangirls were complaining that he cheated, but Haruka ignored them before declaring Takiro the winner. Next up will be Shinsuke Hazuki vs Kiba Inuzuka. Shinsuke immediately jumped into the ring. "Hurry up, dog breath." He taunted, causing his opponent to go red in anger. Kiba put his small dog down before running into the ring. As he crossed the line, however, Shinsuke's solid fist was planted into his jaw, throwing him straight back out. Mizuki began laughing as Haruka face-palmed. He declared Shinsuke the winner before moving on, ignoring Kiba's howls of complaint. Both Naruto and Takiro were chuckling quietly at their friend's quick victory. The fights carried on one by one. Shikamaru vs Choji resulted in the former giving up instantly. Hinata vs a random kid nobody cared to remember had Hinata as the winner. Naruto actually sweat dropped at the pathetic fight between Sakura and Ino, a tie, as they both fell over the circle line while performing some kind of bear hug on each other. Naruto was beginning to get bored when he heard his name called. Naruto, Uzumaki and Sai, please enter the ring. Haruka sounded tired. He couldn't help but find his students to be annoying. It's like his working and textbooks didn't help them fight. Ironic. Naruto thought with a smirk. He then decided to take this seriously, looking at the boy before him. He had that annoying fake smile, and his hand outstretched for the gesture that Haruka showed them at the start. He was the first one to use it in fact. Naruto shrugged before outstretching his and accepting the gesture of peace. I look forward to our spar, Naruto. Everything about this boy was fake, his voice and his facial expressions. Naruto didn't trust him in the slightest. Taking a step back from each other, they didn't even move into a stance. Naruto considered removing his weights, but that would potentially be overkill and raise too many questions. However, he would not hold back on this boy, and he knew the boy wouldn't hold back either. Naruto clenched his fists before releasing a slow breath. Then Sai made a move. Moving at speeds that far surpass a genin, never mind an academy student, he ran at Naruto. Haruka was shocked and thought that Naruto wouldn't be able to defend himself against such speed. However, Naruto grinned. Sai threw a punch towards Naruto, thinking he had taken the boy by surprise, but everyone had forgotten who Naruto was trained by. The fast reflexes, Naruto caught the punch effortlessly before pulling Sai closer to him. Disappointing. He whispered before punched the boy in his jaw, forcing him to the floor. Sai jumped to his feet and went to look at Naruto, but he wasn't there. Appearing behind him, Naruto sent a kick straight into the boy's back, following it up with a spinning kick to his ankles. Sai had his feet kicked out from under him, causing him to drop onto his back. Before he could stand, Naruto punched him so hard the boy spat blood. Before he could carry on, Haruka intervened. That's enough. The winner is Naruto. Naruto began walking towards his friends as Sai crawled out of the ring. Everyone was silent in complete and utter shock. Naruto had completely decimated the new kid, but both were far faster than they were. Izuki had to pick his jaw up from the floor after witnessing such a sight. Haruka rubbed his eyes while asking himself, when did Naruto get so tough? He was definitely not the boy that used to sleep in class and play pranks. Shinsuke and Takiro were capable of watching the entire fight. It was no lie that both boys were also advanced compared to their peers. Shinsuke had training at the same level of the Mist Academy students while also training from a former Jounin. The Mist Village took training very seriously. Takiro had training from Jounin-level clan members in the branch family while also training on his own. Due to his skill in stealth, he has made it a common thing to sneak into the main family's jutsu library, and yet people still called Neji the prodigy. Naruto had even given them the idea to train with weights, and while they weren't as heavy as his, both of his friends still wore heavy weights. They were both clapping for Naruto, while everyone else was whispering things about Naruto being fast and how he scared them. Some even called him cool. Naruto just grinned towards his friends. 2 years is going to be a breeze. And then I will be able to begin my search for Itachi. Naruto thought to himself. 2 years later, it was time for the newly turned genin to get their teams. They had just passed their exams and were rewarded with headbands to prove that they were in fact ninja now. Naruto had changed his look somewhat over the 2 years. His ears had metallic piercing in them, and he was now standing at an impressive 5'1", second to only Shinsuke. He wore black combat gloves that reached up to his elbows. For his shirt he had a high-collared black shirt with a skull on the front. He also wore pitch black Anbu-style shinobi pants and black combat boots. He had taken to walking with his katana strapped to his side and had strapped his weapons pouch to his right thigh. He had a headband wrapped around his neck with a black cloth. All in all he looked like a shinobi. Shinsuke had grown slightly above Naruto, standing at 5'2". His long hair reached his mid-back and had slight black rings around his eyes, indicating lack of sleep. He wore a sleeveless black shirt with the image of two large swords on the front. If one looked closely they would see his lip piercing. He wore pitch black shinobi trousers and black ninja sandals. On his back was a large Zanbatsu sword, a very large sword that looked heavy. He carried it with practiced ease. His weapons pouch was around his left thigh. His headband was tied around his left bicep with the same black cloth as Naruto's. Akira was the shortest of the group at around 4'11", 2 inches smaller than Naruto. His hair was still short and he had a singular ear piercing. He wore a long-sleeved black shirt with the image of a fist on the front. He had bandages wrapped around his hands. He wore black shinobi pants and black shinobi sandals. His weapons pouch was around his right thigh. He had his headband around his forehead, again with black cloth. They had a very similar clothing style and had actually shopped together with Naruto and Shinsuke disguised as other children. They had been training together for the past 2 years non-stop and were surprisingly now on par with each other. Naruto was the best with Injutsu and Ninjutsu, while Takiro was the fastest and specialized in Taijutsu. Shinsuke was the heavy hitter and slightly outclassed Naruto with a sword. The day was the big day, team placements. They had been waiting for this for the past week and the suspense was killing them. Haruka walked in with Mizuki at his side as per usual, although something seemed off about him. So as you all know, today is the day you get your teams and leave the academy. I can honestly say that you have all grown into fine young shinobi and I couldn't be prouder. You all came to me as young idiots that just wanted to fire jutsu and I thought none of you would ever make it. But before me are the next generation of the Leaf Village. The future of Konoha. Now make you village proud. A lot of the students cheered, while one or two actually cried at Haruka's speech. Naruto, Takiro, and Shinsuke just shrugged it off. Now then. Team 1 Naruto decided to zone him out until he heard his name, as this was going to take a while. Team 7. Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Sai. Team 8. Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Aburam, and Hinata Hyuga. Team 9 is still in regulation from last year, so Team 10. Ino Yamanaka, Choji Akimichi, and Shikamaru Nara. Naruto's own back in, there is only 3 people left for a team, and it made him grin. This was going to be good. Team 11. Naruto Uzumaki. He flared his chakra slightly. Shinsuke Hazuki. Shinsuke gave a shark-like grin, cracking his knuckles. And, Takiro Hyuga. Takiro smiled widely as they all quickly high-fived. Wait here and your senseis will arrive shortly. And with that Haruka and Mizuki left the building. Slowly people began pouring in, taking teams 1 through to 10, excluding Team 7. Sasuke was doing his best to ignore Sakura while Sai was too busy drawing. Naruto was talking to his friends, happy about their team. The door then entered and in walked a tall man. He had short brown hair and 2 scars over his left eye. His eyes were green and he wore the typical jounin attire. Everyone perked up to look at the man, Sai seemingly recognizing him but keeping quiet. He looked around the room before landing his eyes on Naruto, Shinsuke, and Takiro. Team 11. Meet me at the academy's training grounds. But that he vanished in a swirl of what appeared to be lightning and water. Immediately Team 11 left the room, not wishing to keep their new sensei waiting. They arrived quickly to see him sitting on the ground, messing with a kunai. Good, you arrive on time. He said without even turning to look at them. The 12-year-olds walked over and sat in front of their sensei. Okay, time for introductions. I want names, likes, dislikes, hobbies and goals. Guess I'll go first. My name is Akami. I like knives, fighting, and training. I dislike traitors, weaklings, and people who slow me down. My hobbies include training with and without knives and practicing my jutsu. And my current goal is to train you 3. Uzumaki, you next. Naruto nodded before speaking up. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I like training, spending time with my friends, and learning new jutsu. I dislike secrets, ignorant people, and traitors. My only hobbies are learning new jutsu and increasing the power of my old ones. My goal is to find Itachi Uchiha for personal reasons. Akami knew about this, so he didn't react in a shocked manner. Hyuga. My name is Takiro Hyuga. I like to train, spar with my friends, and annoying my clan heads by improving my skills. I dislike my clan rules, traitors, and people who turn their back on family. My hobbies are training and reading. My goal is to bring equality to my clan with whatever means necessary. Akami nodded, understanding what he meant, having worked with a Hyuga before. Hazuki. Shinsuke smirked slightly before speaking up. My name is Shinsuke Hazuki. I like training with my sword, hanging out with my friends, and learning water jutsu. I dislike meaningless wars, people who get in my way, and judgmental people. My hobbies include training and sparring. My goal is to eventually obtain one of the 7 swords of the mist and maybe even collect them. Akami smirked slightly, he definitely had a better team than Kakashi, in fact he was very impressed by their appearances and he could even sense their high reserves. Not to mention he could tell they were wearing weights. Meet me at training ground 11 tomorrow, it's new, here are the directions. He handed them small maps before standing up and putting away his kunai. That is where the real test begins. Do not be late. Oh, and bring your A game, or you may have to visit the hospital. With that he disappeared in the same elemental swirl as before. The shared thought was going thought all 3 of the boys' heads. Cool. Meanwhile back at the classroom Team 7 was still waiting for their sensei to arrive, the poor kids. The world around Naruto was dark as he opened his eyes. He could feel a watery substance around both of his feet and around him was a strange sight. It resembled a sewer, with pipes running along the walls. Panicking, he looked for something familiar, but found only more tunnels. What's going on here, he muttered to himself quietly. Concentrating hard, he began to feel for a chakra signature when suddenly his eyes widened. In the distance he could feel more chakra than he had ever felt before, even more than the Hokage. Suddenly he heard a loud demonic roar before his world went black. Naruto sat up on his bed with sweat pouring down his face and his Sharingan active. So that was the Kyuubi. Its chakra is vile and so evil. And it's inside of me, great. He rambled while getting out of bed. Today his team would be facing a trial of their sensei's choice and they had no idea what it was. Opening his drawer he saw his Uchiha shirt but decided now wasn't the right time for that before picking up his usual black shirt with the skull. Getting dressed quickly, he then did some small exercises such as sit-ups and press-ups before picking up his sword and headband. Attaching the headband to his neck and his sword to his waist, he exited his small apartment. One thing he noticed was now that he was a shinobi very few people glared at him and nobody dared to get in his way. It was probably the sword too, it was a real pest repellent. As he walked he tried to think over what the test might be before stopping. Looking up he saw the 4th's face on the Hokage monument. It made his blood boil how they thought of him as a savior, all the while Naruto was cursed by that same man. If the man was still alive, Naruto would not rest before he killed him. Maybe then he would be at peace with his curse. I need to get to the training ground, I've wasted enough time. He said to himself, and with one last glare he took off walking. Pulling out the map he looked at the route before putting it away. Walking past an older training ground he had to hold back laughter at what he saw. The supposed Team 7 were arguing among themselves while their sensei was nowhere to be seen. Naruto concentrated slightly before chuckling. There was a Jounin, obviously their sensei, sitting on a tree branch right above them reading and they didn't even notice. Pathetic. Naruto said to himself before walking on. Naruto arrived into a large field. There was a huge waterfall that led to a stream. A large cliffside surrounded both sides of the waterfall. 3 training dummies were lined in a row and had no marks on them, signifying that they were new. There was a small forest-like area towards the other side of the stream. Naruto could see both of his friends there waiting for him and decided to run over. Hey Naruto, last to arrive again it seems. Takiro said with a smirk across his face. Naruto smirked back. Yes, I got caught up, huh? He replied with, before Shinsuke laughed loudly, followed by the other 2 chuckling. So, how long has Akami-sensei been hiding in the tree? Naruto asked, concentrating so he could find his sensei's chakra signature. The Kiro activated his Byakugan, allowing him to see chakra and more importantly spot the Jounin in question. About 5 minutes, but we aren't late yet, so I am unsure on why he chooses to hide instead of revealing himself. The Hyuga just wanted to get on with this test. Shinsuke pointed his finger at the tree that Akami was hiding behind. Concentrating his chakra into his fingertip he grinned in his shark-like fashion. Water style. Water gun jutsu. A fast, sharp projectile made of water was fired from the Hazuki's finger, traveling towards the tree. It blew apart a hole in the tree, but there was nobody on the other side. The 3 boys looked confused before they felt a spike of chakra behind them. Turning, they witnessed Akami enter in his typical elemental swirl. He had a tired look on his face and was spinning a kunai on his finger. Impressive, there was a decent amount of power behind that attack. Possibly enough to take out a Chunin, but I am a Jounin. Shinsuke looked sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. Naruto decided to speak up. Akami-sensei, you mentioned a test to us yesterday. Does that mean the final academy test is just so our Jounin have the chance to choose who can be shinobi and who needs to go back? Akami smirked. You are a smart one, aren't you? Yes, every other team right now is taking a test chosen by their Jounin sensei. If I think you are unworthy, then you will be back at the academy before you can blink. Now for what this test is. He gave them an intense look before grinning again. It's simple. You just need to beat me. He made it sound easy, but the three newly formed shinobi knew this was by no means a simple task. He outclassed them completely, as he was 2 ranks higher, which meant he had the skill to back it up. The 3 boys instantly knew what this was a test for. It was to see if they would go it alone or team up, and only a fool would take the first option. I want you to go all out, hold nothing back. Come at me with the intent to kill, or you won't get very far. Test begins now. He shouted before vanishing in his swirl. Takiro instantly activated his Byakugan and began searching for him. They might find me already. And I only just disappeared. Impressive. Okami thought to himself. The waterfall. Takiro yelled, and Naruto blurred through hand signs faster than any Chunin could, never mind a genin. Okami didn't recognize the hand signs, but he felt a terrifyingly large amount of chakra build up around Naruto. Fire style. Great Dragon Flame Jutsu. A huge dragon head made of fire burst from Naruto's lungs, traveling towards the waterfall. Okami could feel the heat already, and it was making him sweat slightly. In a burst of speed he shot past the fire jutsu, landing in the open field, while the jutsu collided with the waterfall, kicking up rocks and steam in a loud explosion. Before he had time to breathe, Okami had to bring 2 kunai up in front of him to protect himself from the large buster sword that Shinsuke had swung at him. The force behind the attack pushed the Jounin back slightly, but using the skill that got him the rank of Jounin, he kicked the genin in the ribs, sending him to the side. Just as Shinsuke flew away, Okami had to jump to avoid an open palm from Takiro. In midair he placed his hand on the Hyuga's shoulder for leverage. Before he could make another move however, Naruto appeared in front of him, already in mid-kick. Having nowhere to dodge, Okami took the hit, or so they thought. As he flew away he suddenly burst into smoke, revealing a log. They looked around for their sensei, but they didn't have to look far. Standing on the stream, Okami was going through hand signs. Lightning style. Lightning ball Jutsu. The Jounin called loudly, sending multiple yellow balls of pure electricity towards the genin. Naruto channeled wind chakra through his sword as he unsheathed it before focusing. With expert speed and precision, Naruto began swing his sword towards the oncoming attacks. Okami cursed under his breath, wind chakra easily cancels out lightning. As Naruto's katana met the balls of electricity, they gave off small explosions, sending sparks aimlessly through the air. While Naruto was focusing on defending them, Shinsuke returned to the group, concentrating chakra of his own while flashing through hand signs. He summoned a massive amount of chakra. Water style. Water Dragon Jutsu. Rising from the stream appeared a large serpent made of water, with bright yellow eyes. Takiro dashed towards Okami, stopping around 10 feet in front of him, while the water dragon circled the Jounin. Throwing his hand towards his sensei, Takiro pushed a large amount of condensed chakra towards him. Gentle fist. Air palm. Okami could see that the dragon was waiting for the right moment to strike and knew if he dodged the air palm, it would leave him open. Then he smirked. Raising up both hands he made a single hand sign that Naruto recognized. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 2 identical copies of Okami appeared in a cloud of smoke, the first took the hit from the air palm instantly. The second sent a lightning ball towards the water dragon, but it didn't dispel it. As the clone and the original were about to go through a set of hand signs, their world went black. Looking around them all they saw was a reflection of themselves. Jinjutsu. When? Okami asked himself before flaring his chakra. The illusion dropped almost instantly, but when he came to his senses he felt the large water dragon colliding with his chest, knocking the air from his stomach. As he was being pushed back he saw Naruto looking directly into his eyes, but that isn't what shocked him. His eyes had morphed into the Sharingan. Before he could think it over he was thrown into the stream, landing with a large splash. The 3 genin began running towards the stream in hopes of finishing their sensei off. It was a mistake to get that close. From under the water's surface they could see a strange glow before suddenly several large bright blue laser beams burst towards the genin. Takiro jumped in front of the group with his Byakugan active before spinning. Around him appeared a spinning dome of pure condensed chakra. Rotation. The beam struck the defensive jutsu in a bright flash of light, almost blinding Naruto and Shinsuke. When the light cleared it revealed Takiro breathing heavily, but otherwise unharmed. He then dropped to a knee, having used too much chakra having to keep that up against such a powerful attack. Okami shot out of the stream with knives in hand, aiming to finish off the Hyuga. As he brought kunai down, he was surprised to see Naruto almost effortlessly blocking them with his katana. The sword burst into a spark of electricity, slowly cutting through the 2 knives. Okami went to jump back, but Naruto gripped his ankle with his spare hand. The Jounin was surprised by his strength, but grinned. All of a sudden Shinsuke brought his sword right through the Jounin's waist. It would have killed him if he hadn't vanished in a burst of smoke. This is proving difficult. Shinsuke, Takiro. Take them off. Both boys widened their eyes before smirking. Standing up straight, all three boys began removing their weight. Akami watched closely, having not noticed that they had been wearing any. Figuring it was probably next to nothing, he almost had a heart attack as they dropped to the ground. He could feel a mini earthquake while dust covered the majority of the battlefield, blinding the Jounin. Suddenly the smoke began to clear and Akami strained his eyes. When the smoke disappeared completely, he was shocked to see none of the boys there. He felt something towards his left, and if it wasn't for his instincts as a Jounin, he would have suffered the possible loss of a limb. Appearing almost out of thin air was Shinsuke swing his huge blade. He kept swinging and the Jounin could barely keep up. He then quickly dodged to the side as Takiro came from behind him, hoping to catch him off guard. He thought he could outpace them still, simply because he dodged a few of their attacks, which was his mistake. Both Shinsuke and Takiro continued their onslaught, expertly fighting alongside each other and narrowly dodging each other while still throwing out attacks. Shinsuke's sword got close enough to land a solid hit on Akami, opening up a shallow wound. The Jounin winced in pain, momentarily too distracted to dodge a gentle fist to his shoulder. He felt his arm begin to go numb, but then heard a noise behind him. Making some room between him and the two genin, he glanced behind him just in time to see Naruto's fist impacting his face. Shinsuke sped behind the Jounin while kicking low, tripping Akami. As he was falling, he felt another gentle fist jab into his stomach, causing him to cough in pain. He burst into smoke once more, but this time revealing a log with paper bombs covering it. The three boys quickly dived away, but unfortunately landed in separate areas of the training ground. Shinsuke landed on his back, but rolled quickly onto his feet. He quickly spanned while pulling his large sword in front of him, blocking several kunai and shuriken being thrown at him. Akami appeared from the tree line, running towards the genin. Shinsuke, not being one to back down, met the Jounin head on while swinging his sword. Akami jumped over the large sword before landing a powerful kick to the genin's head. Shinsuke was thrown back, letting go of his sword in the meantime. Akami kicked the blade away from him, keeping it at a distance from the young swordsman. The young Hazuki growled while standing to his feet. He wasn't good at hand-to-hand combat, this was going to be tough. Akami chuckled at the boy before appearing right in front of him in a burst of speed and attempting a punch to the stomach, but Shinsuke span out of the way before attempting a low kick. The Jounin jumped over it, however, before kicking the genin in the chest. Shinsuke gasped for air as he was sent back into a tree. He felt something coming and ducked just in time to miss a kunai to the head. Shinsuke looked at Akami but quickly noticed something. He had no wounds from their earlier fight. So he is a shadow clone. The boy concluded in his mind. He quickly pointed both hands up at the Jounin. Water style. Water gun jutsu. The fast water projectiles sped towards the Jounin at fast speeds, but he jumped over them. Shinsuke clasped his hands together before suddenly the two water projectiles behind the mid-jump Jounin collided, morphing into a miniature water dragon and striking Akami in the back, biting him. The Akami clone cried in pain as he dropped to the stream once more. Shinsuke, summoning the last of his chakra, sped through hand signs. Escape this. Water style. Water dragon barrage. As Akami landed on the water surface, 5 large water dragons formed around him. Before he could even attempt to flee, all 5 of the water serpents collided into him at once, creating a large explosion of pure water and dispelling the clone easily. Shinsuke grinned in his typical shark-like way before he suddenly collapsed to the floor in exhaustion. He had used up every last bit of chakra to win that fight and could only wish his comrades handled their fights too. Takiro landed on a tree branch, quickly looking around. Suddenly he jumped up just as 3 kunai knives embedded themselves in the branch he was occupying. Kicking his feet off of the tree trunk, he pushed himself away as more projectiles landed into the tree. As he landed on the ground, he felt something snap before out of nowhere a large barrage of weapons were sent towards him. Trap. He screamed in his head before spinning. Rotation. His chakra barrier once more appeared, deflecting all the weapons. As he stopped, he began to breathe a little heavily again. Akami dropped down from a tree branch he was standing on. In his hands were more weapons. You've got to be kidding me. Takiro complained as the Jounin threw the small projectiles. Spinning again, he once more used his rotation, deflecting the weapons easily, but causing his breathing to become difficult. Akami was laughing, as if he knew what was happening, and found it humorous. Takiro cursed at him under his breath. Akami went to reach for more weapons, but Takiro quickly closed in the gap between them. Akami widened his eyes in slight surprise and almost didn't manage to dodge the first jab. Narrowly avoiding the attack, the Jounin was put onto the defensive, dodging attack after attack. He smirked, however, as Takiro once more triggered a trap, sending large wooden spears towards the boy. Seeing no other escape route, he sighed and once more rotated until his barrier appeared around him, destroying the wooden projectiles with ease. He was running low on chakra and his sensei knew it. Akami then cockily appeared within 7 feet of the boy, as if to anger him. Given up already? The Jounin taunted while yawning slightly. Takiro smirked however as his Byakugan seemed to intensify. "You're in my range, sensei." It took a second for Akami to realize what he meant, and that second was long enough for the young Hyuga. Dropping into his stance, Takiro glared down at his sensei. "This is over. 8 trigrams. 64 palms." Takiro blurred towards his sensei, hitting 2 jabs into him. He then followed it up with 4 jabs. Then 8. Then 16. After that was 32 and finally finished it off with the 64th jab. His sensei's entire chakra system was now closed off to him. Takiro was not surprised to see Akami burst into smoke as he couldn't hide the fact that he was a shadow clone from the Byakugan. Takiro began coughing intensely before falling onto his back. He overdid it and now he had no chakra. Naruto landed with his back to the cliffside. He had sheathed his sword and had dropped into the famed Uchiha interceptor fist. "What a surprise, one of my students have the Sharingan. That's new considering neither of them are an Uchiha." Akami stood directly above him with his feet on the cliff. Naruto knew this to be wall walking, a form of chakra control. Activating his Sharingan, Naruto looked at his hopefully soon-to-be teacher. "Are we going to be carrying this on alone, sensei?" Naruto asked, clearing some space between himself and his sensei. "You certainly have the Uchiha's arrogance. Let me see if you have their skill." Akami dropped from the cliff before throwing a punch towards Naruto. The young boy saw it coming with his Sharingan and deflected it while throwing a punch of his own. The Jounin tilted his head to the side, effortlessly dodging the punch. What he didn't expect was for Naruto to slap a paper tag on his back. Hearing the familiar sound of a paper bomb, Akami widened his eyes. Naruto jumped away as it exploded, but all that was destroyed was a log. "You'll have to do better," he heard from behind him. As he turned, he dodged a kunai before unsheathing his sword and deflecting 3 more with lightning-fast reflexes. Akami appeared before him as his sword clashed against the Jounin's kunai. They began a duel, neither one making a mistake as they deflected each other's attacks. Akami pulled out another kunai with his spare hand, attempting to pierce the genin's abdomen, but the young shinobi blurred out of existence in a way only Shisui the teleporter could manage. Feeling the young boy's chakra signature behind him, Akami turned just in time to see Naruto holding up the tiger hand sign. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. A huge fireball burst from Naruto's mouth, engulfing the Jounin in seconds. Naruto was once more disappointed however, as it turned out to be another log. His sensei was nowhere to be seen, but Naruto was no fool. He could feel the man's chakra. Coating his blade in lightning once again, he quickly jammed it into the ground beneath him. The ground in front of Naruto exploded in a shower of rock and dirt as Akami emerged with a kunai in hand. However, Naruto was once more prepared and quickly kicked the Jounin in the ribs, sending him rolling on the ground. Naruto then held up a single hand sign with a large smirk while flaring his chakra. Shadow Clone Jutsu. The area around both shinobi was filled with smoke. When it cleared, Akami gasped in shock. He was surrounded by almost 100 clones. Even he could only make around 6 and he was one of the stronger Jounin in the village. Akami jumped to his feet quickly, deciding to take the genin seriously. Taking out another kunai, he suddenly vanished in pure speed. Suddenly, one by one, the Naruto clones began to dispel. Naruto wasn't shocked however, as he began concentrating high amounts of chakra from the back of the clone army. He then opened his eyes and began flashing through hand signs. Akami noticed that it was taking the boy a lot of time to finish the set of hand signs, despite how fast he was going. Hoping to stop it, he began charging directly for the real Naruto, cleaving apart any Naruto clone in his way. The hand signs were almost finished when Akami appeared before him with a smirk before kicking him in the face. However, his smirk turned into a look of shock when the Naruto he just hit dispelled. "I got the wrong one." Before he could think about what he did wrong, multiple clones tackled him and began restraining him. He surprisingly couldn't break free even with all the strength he could muster. Lifting his head, he watched helplessly as the real Naruto finished his set of hand signs. "You're done, sensei." Uchiha fire style. Great fire annihilation. A tsunami of searing hot flames flew from Naruto's mouth, speeding towards the restrained Jounin, who could only watch as the jutsu got closer. The flames dispelled all of Naruto's clones while engulfing Akami and leaving a huge scorch mark across the floor. "Damn clone," Naruto muttered as the flames dispersed and he noticed his sensei was nowhere to be seen. Before he could do anything however, he dropped face first onto the ground. Even he had a limit on the amount of chakra he could use and he just used it all up in that final jutsu. And now all he could do was close his eyes before everything went black. The 3 boys began to slowly open their eyes, waking up at the exact same times. As they attempted to gather their thoughts, they saw their sensei sitting in a meditative position in front of them. "Finally, you're all awake, took you long enough," Akami said in a bored fashion while eating some cooked fish. The boys suddenly remembered the test and attempted to stand but were too weak due to chakra exhaustion. It was already dark and they must have been asleep for at least a few hours. They figured they lost, they only managed to defeat his shadow clones and didn't beat him at all. Sighing, they lowered their heads. Akami noticed this and began chuckling, which then turned to an all-out laugh. Is being a ninja really that depressing? I thought passing would make you cheer. He said, unable to hold back his laughter. The boys widened their eyes. They passed. How? As if reading their minds, Akami decided to explain it to them. The most important thing about being a ninja team is teamwork. You demonstrated that you could work together as if you had been training together since birth. You covered each other's weaknesses and didn't leave any of your comrades to die. And then when I split you up, you proved that you weren't helpless without your teammates. You each fought hard and managed to defeat a shadow clone of myself. You showed me that you could defend yourselves as well as you defend each other and fought surprisingly well. You are easily at a high chunin level, maybe even low jounin. Well done, I am proud to be our sensei. Neither of the boys could register what happened, but they didn't need to as Akami kept talking. We'll collect our first mission in 2 days, relax until then as you've all deserved it. Team 11 is now officially in business. He had a huge grin before disappearing in his usual elemental swirl. The 3 boys began cheering and high-fiving each other, neither of them realizing just what kind of missions they'd be doing. What? A loud shout came from the Hokage's office, voiced by 3 different people. It startled the Hokage's secretary, forcing the woman to drop her files to the floor and spilling her drink over them, destroying the papers. Inside of the Hokage's office stood Team 11, with Hiruzen seated behind his desk as per usual. The 3 boys had ferocious looks on their faces, as if they had been told they were no longer allowed to be shinobi. Akami had an amused expression on his otherwise bored face, enjoying the sight. Hiruzen had an angry look on his face as he stared down the genin. Shinsuke immediately began speaking, being the loudest of the group. I thought we were shinobi now. Give us a real mission, old man. Hiruzen's eyebrow twitched angrily at the complete disrespect the boys were showing him. Akami had to hold back his laughter at the sight. Now you may be wondering what they meant by real mission, well it's simple. Since becoming shinobi, all they have done is chores around the village for a bunch of ungrateful villagers. They were told that these were missions too, but it was just daily duties that their clients couldn't be bothered doing themselves. It didn't help that all the villagers hated Naruto and didn't trust Shinsuke. Most had even tried refusing to pay the 2 boys. These so-called missions were D ranks, the lowest of the low. They didn't even involve exiting the village or fighting of any kind. They had been working for weeks now, non-stop, in some attempt to prove themselves ready for a higher-ranked mission. Entering the Hokage Tower, they were hopeful of it happening, but of course Hiruzen shut it down immediately, offering them a mission to catch a runaway cat that they were sure they had caught a few days prior to this. They had finally had enough and decided to take a stand against their leader, and that's what brings us to here. With a sigh, Hiruzen tiredly but sternly replied. D-Rank's missions are the only mission I can trust to a newly formed genin team, there's no danger involved, so no chance of any casualties. He was getting too old for this job, he really wished he could find a suitable successor so he could retire, again. Naruto rolled his eyes towards the Hokage, further disrespecting him. Have you not lied enough in your old age? I heard Team 7 cheering about going on a C rank, but last I checked we have done far more missions than they have. And you know that we can beat them, so if anyone would have casualties it would be them. Hiruzen sighed at the comment about lies, saddened by what the boy was referring to. Akiro decided to jump in, furthering their argument. From what I remember about them in the academy, the only one in that team with any noticeable skill is Sai, and Sakura is practically as useless as a paper kunai. Sasuke may have potential, but his arrogance blinds him and he doesn't care about the safety of his comrades. And is it true that their sensei left them waiting in the academy for 4 hours longer than everyone else? Lord Hokage, how could you trust that team over us? They are a liability. Akami remained quiet but actually sided with his team. It was true that Team 7 was the pet for the village council, that was why they had Kakashi take them on. They were so taken by their belief in Sasuke as the supposed last Uchiha that they hadn't even noticed that he was training another with far more potential. Hiruzen took one look at Akami, hoping for him to intervene, but when he saw the man he instantly knew that he was going to side with his team. Before he could say anything, Iruka came running into the room with a look of shock and fear. What is it, Iruka? The boys eyed, while Akami decided to pay close attention. Iruka took a second to catch his breath, having ran at his top speed. Gasping for air, Iruka suddenly made eye contact with the Hokage. Lord Third. It's Team 7. They were ambushed by Zabuza Mamachi. He had allies. Team 11 couldn't help but facepalm at the news, with the 3 boys muttering something along the lines of "knew it" in unison. Hiruzen widened his eyes in shock. Looking through the files of available ninja, inwardly screaming when he found none. Sighing, he looked up at Team 11. The boys glared back, knowing what he was about to do and not like it at all. Team 11, it seems a mission just opened up. Pack your gear as you must leave within an hour. Akami sent his team to get their things while he stayed to speak with the Hokage privately. Lord Third, you let the council get too much power. They have potentially sent children to their deaths. I will take down the location and wait for my team at the gates. Hopefully you will have a word with those fools while we are gone. Hiruzen simply nodded sadly while handing over a piece of paper with the location of Team 7. Akami left via his typical swirl, ready for his first mission with his team. Okami, what have they done? Hiruzen thought to himself sadly while looking out of his office window. He would need to address the council about this matter, as it is inexcusable to send children into such a dangerous environment based on biases alone. Kakashi was lying in bed with bandages covering his left leg. He had overused his Sharingan, and his target got away. His team were now in terrible danger, especially with him incapacitated. He had been replaying the events in his head, and it was giving him a headache. It first started with an ambush from two well-known rogue ninja, B-rank level at the most. These were the Demon Brothers of the Mist. He of course saw the ambush coming and decided to test his team. His students watched as he was torn to pieces while the Demon Brothers stared the genin down. Sai and Sasuke jumped to action, prepared to fight the oncoming ninja, while Sakura froze along with their client, Mr. Tizuna. The two boys did well despite being obviously outclassed, but one slipped past the boys and targeted the two behind them. Sakura jumped in the way, pathetically getting slapped out of the way. Before the singular demon brother could get to Tizuna however, Kakashi appeared in one piece holding the rogue ninja in a chokehold. After a little interrogating both the brothers and Tizuna, he found out that their client was a target of some businessman who hired ninja and mercenaries alike to kill him. Leaving them tied up against a tree, they decided to carry out their mission. As if things couldn't get worse, they were then caught inside a thick mist. Confronting the shinobi squad stood an A-rank missing ninja that Kakashi knew all too well. Zabuza Mamachi, the demon of the bloody mist. After some trash talk they fought, resulting in his genin having to free him from a jutsu, Sakura being as useless as ever. Sai and Sasuke worked together and managed to free their Jounin sensei, who continued his fight with Zabuza. Managing to incapacitating the rogue ninja, he was blindsided by two rogue ninja from the rock village, creating an earth wall to stop him from seeing them. Behind the wall a fourth chakra's signature appeared beside Zabuza before all four shinobi vanished. Then Kakashi collapsed from chakra exhaustion, leaving his genin to carry him to Tizuna's house. He immediately sent word to the Hokage after waking up. This was far past a C-rank mission and now bordered the line of A-rank. His genin were incapable of finishing such a mission without assistance. He could only hope the Hokage sent someone strong enough to help them with their mission. He predicted that Zabuza would take time to recover as he would, which would give them a window of maybe a week, 2 if they are lucky. He needed to train his team so they could at least be somewhat prepared for the oncoming battle. He just didn't know how he could train 3 genin to fight on par with a B-rank shinobi. Right now all he could do was recover, tomorrow he would train them. Team 11 stood at the ready, their gear was packed, along with rations. The journey would take 2 to 3 days, depending on how fast they could travel. Okami looked over his team and couldn't help but be impressed. They each had serious expressions, showing him that they were taking their mission seriously. Okay team, before heading out I want some ground rules. You fight as a team and never leave a comrade behind. Do not underestimate an opponent as you will regret it. And finally, Team 7 are our allies, so we do not harm them, well not too seriously anyway. Now then, let's go. And with those final words, Team 11 exited the village for the first time as a team. Running at their top speed, they blurred across the road leading to the Wave Village to finish Team 7's job. They were going so fast they barely noticed the torn up rope on the ground, Okami putting it to the back of his head for now. Right now the Jounin had to worry about facing an unknown number of rogue ninja, hoping their skill would be enough to keep them alive. Akiro had his Byakugan active and was at the back of the team formation, acting as the sensory ninja of the group in order to keep them safe from any and all attacks. Naruto was on the left with his Sharingan active, Okami noticed he always had it activated when they weren't near the villagers or other shinobi. Shinsuke took the left side, keeping his hand on the hilt of his blade, with excitement burning in his eyes at the thought of meeting one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist. Okami took lead, guiding his team towards their location, prepared to jump into action at a moment's notice. Team 7 were waiting in the dining room for their next orders, and they were getting impatient. Sasuke couldn't stop thinking about the powerful killing intent between the 2 A-rank ninja and how it made him feel. He realized how weak he was, but knew he had to get stronger. He was doing his best to ignore Sakura while also glaring at Sai. Sai had remained calm during the entire mission so far, even when they were confronted by Zabuza. He didn't even take a step back, yet Sasuke felt sick to his stomach. He hated his team, Sai was an emotionless show-off who Sasuke secretly envied, while Sakura was completely and utterly useless. All she did was freeze up whenever she was confronted by an enemy. He did however respect their sensei for his skill at the very least. Kakashi was a strong shinobi and had even somehow managed to obtain a Sharingan eye despite not being an Uchiha. Why does everyone have it? I need that power to beat him. He complained in his head while brooding. Sai was sketching in his notebook while ignoring his surroundings. He didn't show it, but Zabuza had him on edge, he was obviously stronger than he was. The man just made him feel as if he was an ant waiting for the swordsman to step on him. Sighing, he carried on drawing. Izuna's daughter was in the kitchen preparing a meal, while Izuna himself was drinking at the table. His grandson only came down from his room when he wanted some food and didn't really speak much, but he always seemed to glare at the shinobi. Sasuke just glared back, while Sai ignored him. Sakura was confused and decided to ask Izuna, who then told her about the man he saw as his father and how he was a village hero. The story ended with Gatu's men publicly executing him after he stood up to them. Sasuke finally got fed up and went to leave the house, but a voice stopped him. "Where are you going, Sasuke?" Turning, he saw Kakashi walking down the stairs, leaning on a crutch for support. He looked somewhat tired still, but at least he was up. "And I was just about ready for a training session. The Jounin knew that would interest the young Uchiha. Follow me out to the forest," he said as he began walking out through the door, his genin following closely behind. Sasuke was eager to learn something, while Sai was emotionless as ever. Sakura was just following Sasuke. Kakashi limped his way towards a tree with surprising speed before stopping. "I am going to teach you to climb this tree." The three students sweat dropped in unison at their sensei. "Climb a tree? Was that a joke?" Sakura, being the loud mouth she is, immediately voiced her confusing. "But sensei, we can already climb trees." Kakashi had to suppress a laugh at his students. Dropping his crutch, he looked at his students with an eye smile. "Oh? But can you climb trees without using your hands?" He focused his chakra slowly before limping to the tree. He put his foot on the trunk before surprising his students by actually walking up the side of the tree. They had their jaws dropped on the floor as Kakashi made his way to a tree branch. He reached into his ninja pouch and pulled out 3 kunai knives. He then threw the knives in front of the 3 genin. "Focus your chakra to your feet. Too little and you won't stick, but too much and you will blow off of the tree. Use the knives to mark how high you get. I want to see you standing upside down from a branch by tomorrow." Sasuke and Sai reached down before picking up their knives. Looking at them, they then both ran towards a tree, barely getting 2 feet off of the ground before the bark exploded from the tree and they were sent to the ground. Sasuke growled before standing back up. As the 2 boys were about to carry on trying, they heard their female comrade. "Done, sensei." True to her words, the girl was standing on the edge of a tree branch with a proud smile on her face. Kakashi widened his eye towards the weakest member of the group with shock. "She is from a villager family, I suppose having a tiny chakra supply really helps with control," Kakashi said before flashing her an eye smile. Sasuke once more had his jaw on the floor. Sakura, an annoying fangirl with no actual skill, had managed to get all the way up the tree before he, an Uchiha, could even get halfway. This was absurd, impossible, it made no sense. He then turned from Sakura to look at Sai before realizing the boy had just passed halfway given by the markings on the tree. He quickly dashed at the tree again, focusing his chakra to the best of his abilities. No way would the last Uchiha be the last at this too. Kakashi began to make his way down the tree. "Keep it up, all 3 of you. I will meet you back at the house for dinner, I hope to hear good news." Kakashi picked up his crutch while rushing back to the house. He needed to keep an eye on the house at all times, as there was no telling when Zabuza and his friends would show up, despite it only being the second day. Sasuke and Sai made eye contact before dashing towards their respective trees in hopes of beating the other. Sakura watched while practicing a little more herself. Team 11 had just reached the Wave Village and they all shared a thought. This place was a mess. From what Akami could gather, this place was under the rule of a business tyrant named Gatu, and he destroyed the once proud village, reducing it to almost rubble. Naruto found it disgusting that such a place existed simply because of one power-hungry fool. Akami briefed them on what he knew of the village on the way there, so they could be prepared. Shinsuke swore that he would drown the man responsible for this, while Takiro and Naruto silently agreed with their friend. Walking through the village, all they saw were poor families out on the street. There were elderly men and women to young small children, and everything in between. The buildings looked run down, and there was an awful stench in the air around them. They could see armed men bullying pedestrians, saying they owed money, and using threats of violence. Okami could see it angering his students, and decided to go deal with it. Walking towards the man, he saw him raise a hand, preparing to strike a young boy for protecting his mother. Thinking fast, the Jounin forcefully gripped the man's arm. "I think you're done here." The man and his accomplice quickly turned to face whoever had dared to get in their way, coming face to face with Okami. The Jounin had a cold glare on his face, his students mimicking the look while standing behind him. And ninja. They stuttered out, noticing the headbands. The glares they were receiving made them freeze with fear. Tell Gatu we're here for him. Akami's tone was dark, and his words promised pain. The men were now shaking, and when Akami let go of the first one's arm, they immediately ran in the opposite direction to the ninja. The small child was looking up at Akami almost in tears. Before he could thank them, Akami ruffled his hair. You're brave, you would make an excellent shinobi. The boy began smiling, while his mother muttered thanks to the shinobi. The group then turned and went back to their primary objective. Find Team 7 and help them. Akami followed the map to a small forest on the outskirts of the village, with his young students not far behind him. As they were walking, Akami felt something behind him and immediately pulled out a kunai before turning. His knife clashed with another and Akami looked at the possible threat. He suddenly felt all tension drop as he came face to face with a beaten-up Kakashi Haddock. You're who the Hokage sent. I was expecting Chunin at least. Akami scoffed at his fellow Jounin. Trust me, my team will be enough. Kakashi Haddock, meet Naruto Uzumaki, Takiro Hyuga, and Shinsuke Hazuki. We are Team 11. Akami introduced his team with great pride and immediately the copy ninja looked at Naruto. The boy noticed his stare and flashed him a smile. Hello Inu, it's been a while. Naruto addressed the man, calling him by his former Anbu codename. Kakashi widened his eye in slight shock before his eye curled into his usual eye smile. He used to watch over the boy as a part of his assignment in Anbu Black Ops, along with his squad and/or the two Uchihas. He was once a small little troublemaker. He could honestly say that he grew well. I hope you've all been taught well, I want you to be able to keep up with my team after all. Kakashi said jokingly, causing Akami to smirk cockily. Deciding to brag, he looked the copy ninja dead in the eyes. Naruto there is a master of both ninjutsu and jinjutsu, while also extremely fast and skilled with a sword. Not to mention he can create over 100 shadow clones without even tiring slightly. And he has a little surprise, he may show you when the fighting begins. Shinsuke is from the famous Hazuki clan of the Mist Village and has trained in the ways of the 7 ninja swordsmen. Plus he likes to use a similar sword to your friend Zabuza, plus he is a master of water jutsu. Takiro is a natural prodigy among the Hyuga branch family, mastering several main family techniques, and he is a true master of the gentle fist, pushing even myself in close combat. All three of them separately defeated one of my shadow clones each, while together managed to land a hit each on me. The 3 genin were grinning, thankful for their sensei's praise. Akami spoke of them as if he knew they could potentially do anything they wanted if they put their minds to it. Kakashi was lost for words. He was literally rendered speechless. Akami waited to hear what his team was capable of. Kakashi was legendary and known throughout all of the nations, his team must be promising. Kakashi chuckled nervously while diverting his eyes. Well, my team are currently learning tree walking. Akami looked at the man thinking he was joking, he was awaiting the punchline, but it never came. A sweat drop began to form on the back of Akami's head. You taught them that little, and yet you thought they were ready for a C rank. Akami said judgingly, silently cursing the man. What were you teaching them this entire time? Teamwork. He said, but he did not expect the copy ninja to nod. Seriously? You're lucky they aren't dead yet. Kakashi smiled at his fellow Jounin before beginning to walk towards where his students were currently training. Team 11 couldn't help but facepalm at the sight they came to. Sakura was sitting on a tree branch high above the ground. Sai was also stood on a tree, upside down and pulling faces at Sasuke who was still attempting to climb the tree, with his anger disturbing his focus. They hadn't even noticed the newcomers until Kakashi addressed them. Team 7. Our backup has arrived. Meet Team 11, you probably remember them from the academy. We will be working together to finish our mission, so play nice. Immediately the members of Team 7 turned to see their reinforcements. Upon seeing who they were, there were mixed reactions. Sakura looked confused, wondering why another genin team was there. Sai immediately shivered upon seeing Naruto, remembering the beatdown he suffered the few years prior to graduation. Sasuke stared at the team wondering what made them worthy of backing him up. Team 11 were smirking at them, making Team 7 feel somewhat puny in comparison, without even having to display any power or skill. Their confidence gave them a powerful aura. The members of Team 7 got to the ground before walking closer to the slightly taller boys. There was an intense silence between them as both teams stared at each other. Neither team blinked. Suddenly Team 11 flared their chakra, making it noticeable even for the other genin. Despite not wanting to admit it, Team 7 were scared of the other genin. They were far stronger than them, it wasn't hard to notice. Even Kakashi was shocked at their power and all they did was flare their chakra. Before things could escalate however, Akami broke the silence. So where do we go for some food? Kakashi's sweat dropped slightly before walking towards Tizuna's house. Entering the house, Tizuna could be seen at the table. The drunken man looked shocked at seeing more ninja, but seeing Kakashi with them put him at ease. He saw a man around Kakashi's size first. He dressed in the same gear as the copy ninja, but definitely looked different. He had brown hair and two identical scars over one of his green eyes. Behind the man stood three boys. They were all dressed in similar dark clothing and definitely looked a lot more intense than the brats he got at first. They even had special weapons, so in his eyes they were authentic shinobi. "The name's Izuna, I'm glad to see that help has arrived. Welcome to my home." He greeted them with a smile. The boys bowed at the man, while Akami smiled. "My name is Akami, I am the leader of Team 11. The light-haired one is Shinsuke Kazuki. The one with wide eyes is Takiro Hyuga. And the last one is Naruto Uzumaki. We are prepared to protect you with our lives and are very capable of keeping you alive and well." Izuna seemed impressed by the group, unlike how he reacted to Team 7. They really seemed like they could get the job done. Izuna's daughter greeted the group after her father, while inviting them for dinner. Kakashi went to leave for his team, but a hand stopped him. He turned to see Naruto with a slight smirk. "Inu, may I go and collect your team? You really should recover after all." Kakashi knew he had hidden intentions, but decided it would be a good test for his team. Kakashi nodded to Naruto before sitting down at the table. Naruto quickly left the house, running to where the genin were still training. Sasuke had almost managed to get up the tree, he was so close. He hated that he was the last member of his team, but it only fueled his efforts. In his head he kept replaying how Naruto and the other two flared their chakra, forcing him to freeze up. How were they so strong? As he asked himself these questions, the boy in question entered the forest. "Almost there, Uchiha, try harder and perhaps you'll get it," Naruto said mockingly. Team 7 were now on edge, they hadn't even noticed him approach them. "Your sensei sent me to collect you for dinner." The three jumped down from the trees and prepared to get back to the house, but Naruto stood before them. They each looked confused as Naruto began grinning. Raising eyebrows, Team 7 stared at Naruto questionably. As if reading their minds, Naruto began to settle into a stance. "But before that, how about a little test? I'll let you get your dinner if you can defeat me." Team 7 gasped in shock at their fellow genin, not taking him seriously. Sakura, thinking it was some kind of joke, attempted to walk around Naruto. The dark-clothed boy suddenly blurred in front of her, his fist embedded in her stomach, sending the girl back to her teammates. Sakura was gasping for air, while her two comrades dropped into stances. Naruto had a large smirk on his face, as his eyes slowly morphed into the Sharingan. "Come, show me what you can do." Both boys took a deep breath before lunging at Naruto from either side. "Here we go." Both boys rushed at Naruto, and he let them think they caught him off guard. Waiting until the very last moment, Naruto blurred out of existence, using the variation of the Shunshin that Shisui invented and taught him. Sai and Sasuke didn't expect this however, and hadn't pulled their attacks, landing a fist against each other's face. "Surely you can do better than that." Naruto taunted from behind Sakura, who screamed in shock. Sasuke immediately rushed Naruto in an attempt to overwhelm the boy. Naruto simply smirked and began dodging, avoiding each and every attack from Sasuke with practiced ease. Out of the corner of his eye he watched Sai remove a tanto blade that was sheathed on his back before said boy circled the other two. Naruto grinned, maybe this would be a little interesting after all. Sai ran at Naruto from behind, while Sasuke kept his onslaught going, throwing punch after punch in hopes of hitting Naruto. As Sai got close he attempted to lunge at Naruto, aiming for the other boy's back. Naruto suddenly jumped in the air, planting his feet on Sasuke's chest. Picking off with unbelievable force, Sasuke was thrown to the ground while Naruto back-flipped over Sai's blade. Sai span around, swinging his blade in a wide arc, hitting Naruto in his stomach, or so he thought. Naruto suddenly melted over the blade and disappeared into thin air. Sai widened his eyes as he came to a sudden realization. Jinjutsu. Focusing chakra, he clashed his hands together in a hand sign. Release. The world around him distorted before everything around him became normal once more. Looking up he saw Naruto's foot mere moments before his head was almost taken off. The emotionless boy was sent flying through the air at high speeds, clashing into Sakura to break the fall. Naruto chuckled before feeling a chakra spike behind him. He heard Sasuke's voice call out his jutsu. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. Naruto smirked as he turned, flashing through hand sign faster than Sasuke thought to be possible, before landing on the familiar hand sign of a fire jutsu. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. Naruto used the same jutsu, but it was considerably different. It was far larger than Sasuke's for a start, while also feeling far hotter. It was burning the grass around it to mere ash as it passed by. The two fireballs clashed, and Naruto's easily engulfed the smaller one that Sasuke had hoped to surprise him with. The young Uchiha widened his eyes in shock before running for his life. Jumping to the side, he barely avoided getting cooked by the chakra-infused flames. Sai quickly pulled out his notebook and a paintbrush, immediately drawing at a fast pace. Naruto looked on with a raised eyebrow, curious as to what he was doing. Super Beast Scroll. Sai called suddenly, planting both hands over the paper and infusing the ink with chakra. Naruto was slightly impressed as three large tiger-like creatures made of pure ink burst from the page, growling at him. Pulling out his sword, he infused it with wind chakra, making it faster and sharper than it already was. The beast suddenly charged at Naruto, who decided to wait until they reached him. The first one lunged at him in an attempt to bite him in half, but Naruto saw it coming easily. Spinning to the side, he dropped low and cleaved his sword through the creature's legs, spraying ink all over the ground as the monster dispersed. Not very durable, are they? It was a rhetorical question, he knew they wouldn't last long due to being made of ink. Sai narrowed his eyes, he still had two beasts left and there was still a chance. The second one swiped at Naruto with its claws. Naruto jumped over the attack before landing on the creature's back. He attempted to bring his blade down through the tiger, but the third one suddenly dived for him. Diving low, he rolled under the third creature's attack, pulling his blade above his head and slicing it from the chest down to the stomach. Standing up, he had to jump back as the last one attempted to catch him off guard by pouncing at him. Reacting fast, Naruto changed the affinity he added to his blade from wind to fire, causing flames to burst from its sharp edges. Swinging in a diagonal arc from his upper right to lower left, he sent a thin arc of pure flames at the pouncing creature. The fire clashed with its open mouth and immediately caused the ink monster to explode in flames, showering the ground with hot ink. Naruto had to roll backwards to avoid a spinning kick from Sasuke while sheathing his sword. Getting to his feet, he caught a punch from the other boy before pulling him closer and slamming his knee into the Uchiha's abdomen. The wind was knocked out of the boy's lungs from the power of the attack, but he had no time to recover as Naruto span low with an outstretched leg, tripping Sasuke. As he hit the ground, all he could see was Naruto's fist about to impact his face. Then, black. Naruto stood up, turning only to find no trace of Sai. I could have sworn I left him just there. Naruto said humorously in his head. He felt something move in the ground beneath him and it didn't take a genius to figure out what was happening. Jumping into the air, Naruto raised both legs as Sai burst from the ground trying to catch the member of Team 11 by surprise. As Sai's head appeared from the ground, Naruto brought down both legs in a double kick to the other boy's face. Sai had no chance of dodging and simply had to let it happen as his world faded into black. Naruto stepped off of the unconscious boy before looking at Sakura. The girl was trembling with fear, it was highly pathetic in his eyes. Cracking his knuckles, he blurred out of existence again. Sakura widened her eyes in surprise to see him vanish, thinking he had just left her alone. Oh boy, was she wrong. Her look of surprise turned into a look of pain as Naruto appeared with his fist embedded in her stomach. The useless Kunoichi couldn't handle Naruto's attack and was immediately knocked into the same state as her two comrades. Stupid girl, should have fought alongside her comrades instead of leaving them to do all the work. Looking around, he rubbed his hands together to get rid of some of the dirt they had gotten on them. Sighing, he quickly summoned two clones. Let's bring them back. The original said while the two copies nodded in agreement, each taking a member of Team 7 by the foot and dragging them back in a comedic fashion, with the original taking Sasuke. Kakashi was just filling in Akami on what had happened between them leaving the village and arriving at Wave. Akami had no idea why Kakashi thought his team could do this, especially with minimal training. The great copy ninja of all people should know the dangers of a genin squad going on a mission above their rank. He also had a quick word with Izuna about tricking them into going on a possible A rank mission with only a C rank payment, telling him he'd have to pay the Leaf Village when Wave is once more free. Everyone was around the table waiting for the others to return, but nobody expected the entrance. The door was flung open as three Narutos entered the house, dragging the sleeping members of Team 7 unceremoniously by their ankles. Sasuke had twigs in his hair for goodness sake. Kakashi had formed a large sweat drop at the back of his head at the sight. Team 11 were laughing loudly at Naruto's entrance, seeing the funny side to it. They weren't going to let them forget about this anytime soon. Naruto had even drawn on their faces with Sai's paintbrush, giving them all mustaches and glasses. It was surely an embarrassing sight. Even Izuna's grandson, the sulky brat that doesn't talk, had to catch himself from laughing at what had happened. Akami whispered a comment about his team definitely not needing to keep up with Team 7 with a slight chuckle, while the copy ninja just shook his head. Naruto dropped their ankles, leaving them in the middle of the floor before taking a seat at the table. So? Is dinner ready? Izuna and his daughter laughed at the boy, he acted as if nothing happened. Izuna's daughter walked into the kitchen to collect the food while everyone else waited at the table. Kakashi gave Naruto a questioning look, hoping for some information on how they did. Naruto, as if reading his mind, decided to comply. First of all, Sakura is helpless, useless, and leaves everyone to do the work for her. You should consider dropping her if she doesn't improve, as she will hold Team 7 back from possible greatness. Moving on, I was somewhat impressed with the other two. They demonstrated teamwork, using tactics to try and distract me, while the other attempts to get to my blind spots. I did not expect Sai's ink-style jutsu however, and it seemed to be a valuable technique. Sasuke was arrogant at first, but seemed to realize he stood no chance, but he showed me good skill for a genin. Not quite Chunin level yet however despite knowing a high-level jutsu compared to the average genin. If you had a third member that could potentially practice in the Jinjutsu area of expertise, then you would have a solid team. Kakashi was shocked, Naruto actually praised his students, despite them losing to him. He knew that Sakura was the weak link of Team 7 and agreed that he should try and replace her as she spends more time fawning over Sasuke than actually trying to become stronger. A Jinjutsu expert would be helpful and luckily he knew where to get one. He would remind himself to talk to the Hokage when they returned to the village. Okami was proud of his student's observation, he really was somewhat of a prodigy, as were his other two members. Zabuza Momochi will return in 3 days, that is how long it will take for him to recover. We need a plan and we need one now. Zabuza has at least 3 allies that we know of, they helped him get away while I had him weakened. Trusting Zabuza, he'll likely have more, he already lost once, and he'll want to make sure that it doesn't happen again. Kakashi said, suddenly becoming serious. This was a matter that needed to be taken care of now. My team can accompany Mr. Tizuna to the bridge while he is doing his work and watch over him. I trust them to keep him, and while they are gone I will watch the house while you train your team. For the actual battle however, someone will have to stay here at the house. I'd bet anything that they would attack Tizuna's family while we are too busy to react. I nominate myself for that position. Okami was speaking as if he had done this 1,000 times. His students watched him as he planned out the scenario. Kakashi nodded, it was time he trained his team seriously and Sakura would be kept out of the fighting as much as possible as she would only get herself killed. Sasuke and Sai however would jump into action at a moment's notice so they would need to be capable of handling themselves in a fight. He had to admit that Team 11 would be more capable of keeping Tizuna safe as well, even the drunken bridge builder agreed. We'll protect a bridge builder with our lives, no harm will come to him. Takiro said professionally, assuring the old man of his protection from harm. Shinsuke smiled a toothy grin while Naruto nodded as they agreed with their friend. Before they could carry on with their conversation, Tizuna's grandson slammed his hands onto the table. He had anger burning in his eyes, surprising those present. His glare was fixed on the shinobi around the table, the students of Team 11 just glanced at him, while the two Jounin turned to face him. You can't beat Gato. He suddenly screamed, surprising everyone. Shinsuke stood to his feet, towering over the boy. You wanna bet, brat? Gato will be the next to go after his grunts, just because a snot-nosed kid like you can't do anything meaningful doesn't mean us professionals can't either. He was angry, he hated being told he couldn't do something. All his life his parents told him he could never be as strong as the 7 ninja swordsmen, but that only fueled his determination. The kid had tears in his eyes before screaming at the top of his voice. Heroes are stupid. All they do is die. Before running up to his room crying. Naruto put a hand on his friend's shoulder to calm him down, knowing how hot-headed the water ninja was, while Okami looked questionably at Izuna. Please forgive my grandson, he wasn't always like this. It started a year or 2 ago. The day his father died. The shinobi were shocked but kept quiet hoping for him to carry on. You see, it wasn't his real father, but he was damn close to the boy. He saved him from a lake that some other kids had thrown his puppy in, and he dived in despite not knowing how to swim. Kaiza had gotten him out of the water and from that day on they were closer than any parent and their child. Kaiza even became somewhat of a village hero, stopping a major flood by swimming against the currents. Then came Gato and his goons. They wished to take over Wave and tried to force everyone to give them money. Kaiza wouldn't back down and people cheered for their hero. The cheering was soon silenced as Gato had him publicly executed, with my grandson watching from the crowd. Since that day this village lost all of its hope and submitted to Gato. The students of Team 11 sighed before getting up from the table and walking to the door. Okami looked at them curiously, as if wondering what they were doing. Where are you 3 going? He asked from his seat at the table, and all 3 of them turned with dead looks. We're not hungry, so we're going to train. Gato will pay for what he has done here. Takiro said with a cold tone, shocking Kakashi who had only seen their peaceful side. Okami simply nodded, giving them permission to leave. Just as they left, the members of Team 7 began to stir. Sasuke opened his eyes slowly, wondering where he was as his eyes began to adjust. Are we dead? He asked out loud, and all Kakashi could do was facepalm as Okami began snickering. The 3 boys found their way to a large open clearing. Pulling out 2 large scrolls each, they sat on the ground and began to read. Naruto was looking at wind jutsu and lightning jutsu. Shinsuke was searching through high-leveled water jutsu, hoping to increase his jutsu arsenal. The Kiro had one scroll labeled Hyuga's secret techniques, while the other was labeled the 8 inner gates. Each of them were concentrating before standing up to practice. It was the next day, and the sun was up radiating the entire forest in its luminous glow. There were 3 boys lying in the clearing seemingly asleep, and surrounding them were numerous large craters, and some nearby trees were sliced in half. Scorch marks littered the clearing, as if it was hit by a large number of lightning bolts. Some of the craters were filled with water, yet there was no lake nearby. What seemed to be a young female appeared from the tree line holding a basket with long black hair. She noticed the bodies and cautiously made her way over to them, her hand deep in the basket, as if she was reaching for something. As she got in front of them she noticed the headbands immediately, widening her eyes in shock. Shinobi. They aren't the ones who fought Zabuza, so I guess the copy ninja called for backup. Good job that Gatu gave us some reinforcements, but if I could take them out here, then we'd be guaranteed victory when he recovers. She said to herself as she pulled out a handful of needles, but as she was prepared to throw them they began to change. The long thin needles slowly began to change into small snakes, hissing and attempting to bite her hand. With a gasp she dropped them, but as they hit the floor they began to grow in size while morphing into each other until it was taller than the treetops. When she looked up she saw the sun was red instead of the usual yellow, but that wasn't what scared her. The shape of the infamous Uchiha bloodline, the Sharingan, was on the sun. She suddenly came to her senses and clashed her hands together while flaring her chakra. "Release!" she shouted, and instantly she came back to the real world. Sweat was covering her face as she realized it was a trap. Looking up she saw the 3 shinobi staring her down with cold eyes. She was beginning to panic now. If they were able to get her under a jinjutsu without her even noticing, then maybe they were a little stronger than the others. Naruto looked at her, activating his Sharingan dramatically, making her stomach drop. So, Zabuza's pets come out to play it seems. She began to curse under her breath as she realized they could hear what she thought was in her head. What did you mean by reinforcements? Just who else did Gatu hire? Takiro asked with a cold tone, telling her that if she didn't answer, there would be consequences. She reached around but found that her basket wasn't in her hand. Looking for something? Shinsuke followed it on while holding said basket up for her to see. His sharp teeth were beginning to show. She suddenly dropped into a stance and Team 11 almost seemed amused at the sight. That is until she began to go through hand signs. Takiro sighed as he activated his Byakugan and stepped in front of his friends. I style. 1000 needles jutsu. The girl shouted as the air around her became cold. Suddenly from thin air, 1000 sharp needles of pure ice appeared, blurring towards Team 11, but Takiro was already spinning. Rotation. The rotating orb of chakra sprung into action instantly, and the ice needles hit the defensive shell and were immediately destroyed. The girl was shocked as she slowly stepped into one of the craters of water. Shinsuke was already finished with his hand signs as he appeared from the water and stood right next to her. Water style. Water prison jutsu. A large orb of pure water surrounded the girl, trapping her instantly while also giving her no oxygen to breathe. Naruto stood before her as she struggled for air. She held up a hand sign and slowly the water orb began to freeze over, but not fast enough. Naruto's Sharingan span a little before she was knocked prone. The freezing instantly stopped and she floated there in shock, unable to move a muscle. That was a paralysis jinjutsu, you won't be able to move for a while, so I suggest you start giving us answers before you drown, or we'll just have to go find Zabuza ourselves. The girl's eyes widened in fear and anger, but there was nothing she could do. Blink once if you are willing to tell us what we want to know, and blink twice if you refuse. If you wish to see Zabuza again then I suggest the first option. Naruto ordered as he stared at her with his cold blood-red eyes. She tried to weigh up her options, but she knew that the only way that she could protect Zabuza is by giving them the answers they seek. Sighing, she made up despite knowing that Zabuza would be mad at her for giving in so easily. She blinked once, slowly while trying to avoid eye contact with Naruto as much as possible. Naruto smirked before nodding to Shinsuke. The shark-like ninja clicked his finger and the jutsu instantly dispersed, showering the grass with more water. The girl landed head first on the ground as she was still under the effects of the paralysis jutsu Naruto used. Looking at the ninja, she realized that they were waiting for her to talk. They looked expectantly at her, it kind of made her uncomfortable. Taking a deep breath she began to talk. After the demon brothers were bested by Kakashi Haddock, Gatu and Zabuza began to disagree on certain matters. Zabuza said he'd do it himself, but Gatu refused to listen to reason. He hired more rogue ninja, 6 of them. 2 were from the Rock Village, Kakashi saw them in his encounter with Zabuza. Another 2 are from the Cloud Village and were apparently Jounin. The last 2 however make me uncomfortable. The first has the headband of the Hidden Grass Village and seems completely insane, but he is strong. He has a large tri-bladed scythe and a strange black cloak with red clouds. The second has the headband for the Hidden Waterfall Village and is taller than Zabuza. He has strange stitch markings and the same cloak as his partner. Even Zabuza hasn't said anything to them. Other than that there's the demon brothers again as they were freed, and us. Team 11 looked shocked and confused. What kind of ninja makes an A-rank demon of the mist quiet? It can't be good. They have more allies than they had anticipated and they now needed to warn the others. Tell Zabuza that we need to have words. We will see you in a few days, you better be sure of your side. Naruto's Sharingan began to spin the opposite way than it did before and suddenly the girl could feel her limbs again. My name is Haku by the way. There is one more thing, Gatu has collected an army of mercenaries behind our back and didn't think we'd notice. He's planning to double-cross us. Zabuza will be far more open to negotiations than usual. The girl said as Team 11 began to leave the clearing, heading straight back to the house. Haku lifted up her basket before grabbing a few herbs. She quickly headed back to their current hideout to inform Zabuza on what had occurred. She didn't notice the two sets of eyes watching her from the distance. Standing on two tree branches were the two cloaked shinobi Haku had mentioned. The white-haired one with the scythe had a bloodthirsty grin on his face, while the other one had a mask that covered his lower face. Those boys are interesting Kakuzu, Jashin would like them dead, he wants them to bleed, to beg for mercy as I sacrifice them to the great lord himself. The white-haired man chuckled insanely, with a twisted grin on his face, as the whites of his eyes began to get filled with psychotic-looking red veins. The taller one glanced at his partner with his strange green eyes, they were filled with pure hatred for everything and everyone. He began to speak in a dark deep voice. Shut up Haiden. We should inform the others of a runaway Uchiha, Itachi may be interested. Then we await Pain's orders. Haiden rolled his eyes before both men disappeared suddenly, heading towards their own hideout. The kami was sitting at the table twirling a kunai knife between his fingers, he had a bored expression on his face. Team 7 had left early to train, in hopes of getting stronger in such a small amount of time. His own students hadn't even bothered to return last night, but he couldn't leave to look for them because he had to watch over the house and didn't want to waste chakra on clones in case of an attack. All he could do was wait for his students to return. Izuna was waiting on them too, he needed to get to work as soon as possible, considering he was in charge. The door flew open suddenly, a kami gripping his kunai just in case, but relaxed when he saw his faces. He was about to ask them where they was when Takiro spoke up. The kami-sensei, we interrogated an associate of Zabuza's. There's 10 of them altogether. Them 2, the demon brothers, 2 from the rock village, 2 from the cloud village, but the last 2 are apparently the worst. They even make Zabuza want to stay quiet. They wear matched black cloaks with red clouds on them. Sir, Zabuza is an A-rank ninja notorious for intimidating enemies and being fearless. What kind of shinobi can keep someone like him quiet? The kami had wide eyes. He could have sworn he had heard of people sighted in similar cloaks to what his student described, but couldn't remember anything. It was true that Zabuza liked to talk, and he was an A rank. The only thing higher would be an S rank, a cage-level shinobi with immense skills, capable of slaughtering an army on their own. He closed his eyes as he tried to think of a way they could survive against such high-level ninja, but couldn't think of anything. Looking up with a serious expression that held a hint of fear, he created a clone. Get Kakashi, tell him it's urgent. This just got a lot more dangerous. His clone nodded before vanishing in his swirl of the elements. Sighing, he waited for the copy ninja to arrive, hoping there would be no casualties. This has potentially turned into an S-rank mission, and they only had 2 jounin and 6 genin. Oh kami, please watch over my students. The room was silent as Kakashi and Akami looked at each other seriously, the latter having just finished telling the former about the new information his students had found. S-rank shinobi were no joke, even jounin had trouble surviving encounters with them. 2 of them would be trouble even for a cage. Kakashi had his hands together on the table as he entered a thinking pose, hoping to come up with something that could help. Akami glanced towards his students and noticed a slight worry on their faces. Giving them a smile, he could see how it almost instantly reassured them. Don't worry, we will survive this. People will be telling stories of our great success as a team. His voice held a warm, soothing tone which gave them confidence. In truth, he had no idea what he could do, they had maybe 2 days before the inevitable confrontation. One thing he knew however is that even if he had to die to do it, he would keep his students safe and alive. The students of Team 7 were panicking in 3 stages. Sai was sweating heavily, while clutching his notepad a little harder than usual. Sasuke was breathing heavily and physically shaking, knowing he stood no chance. Sakura was crying pathetically and curled into a ball, but nobody expected anything useful from her. Izuna had entered a deep fit of depression, thinking it was over for his village and that he had sentenced children to death for his own goals. His family were panicking in the next room, not knowing what was going to happen to them. Kakashi opened his eyes slowly. Akami, I think we will need to take the S-rank ninja ourselves, but unfortunately that leaves Zabuza and his other friends. That also means that you cannot stay here at the house. I think Naruto should be here in your place, he should be able to take on Chunin, which is the likely rank sent to merely capture 2 civilians. Shinsuke and Takiro will have to take on the Demon Brothers and Zabuza, while Sai and Sasuke take on Haku. Sakura will guard Izuna. Naruto was shocked that he would be the one to have to stay, he was somewhat disappointed to miss the bridge battle, but accepted his role nonetheless. Okami knew this was necessary, only one of his students would be capable of fighting 2 Chunin. I hope you're going to be fully recovered Kakashi, I'm going to need you at the top of your game for this. Okami said jokingly, but he had underlining of seriousness in his tone. Kakashi smiled before taking Sasuke and Sai out to train, leaving Sakura curled up on the floor while shaking his head. As for you 3, I am going to need you to take Izuna to his bridge. Naruto, if anything happens send me a clone. Team 11 nodded to their sensei before leaving through the door, closely followed by the bridge builder. Okami sighed deeply before looking at the floor and seeing Kakashi's final student. Shaking his head he simply went back to thinking of ways to survive the mission. He had more important things to think about than wondering why a ninja was curled up on the floor crying her eyes out. Okay, Sasuke and Sai. It is time I teach you properly, this mission calls for it after all. You two work well together so I am going to teach you, Sai, a jutsu to complement Sasuke's arsenal. It is to be incorporated with Sasuke's fireball jutsu. Wind breakthrough. Kakashi held up a hand sign before exhaling a powerful blast of condensed air. The tree in front of the copy ninja was completely uprooted, falling backwards with a loud crash. He quickly showed Sai the hand signs before sending him off to practice on his own. As for you Sasuke. Kakashi turned to him with an eye smile while cracking his arms, unsettling the genin more than the thought of fighting an S-rank ninja. Time to awaken the Sharingan. As Team 11 were walking with Izuna, they were sure they heard a high-pitched scream of pain from the direction of the house. So Izuna, is the bridge far from here? Naruto asked, hoping to bring the mood back up a little. The bridge builder was tense, he had sweat pouring from his brows, and his hands were visibly shaking. Looking towards the genin he tried talking in hopes of distracting himself. It's air, just up ahead. Through the tree line. His voice was weaker than usual, this man was really unsettled. Takiro looked to Naruto with his Byakugan activated. Speaking quietly and professionally so only the other boy could hear. We are being watched. 2 signatures, one looks to be unable to walk. Naruto simply nodded having already felt them. The group stopped walking, Naruto and Takiro signaling Shinsuke to be ready. Izuna was looking around frantically, freaking out. Tension began to form as slowly 2 figures appeared from the tree line. The tallest was a large tan man with bandages covering the lower half of his face, no shirt and baggy trousers. He had a large blade on his back and instantly Shinsuke recognized him. In his arms was the bloody, beaten form of Haku. Blood stained her clothes and she was covered in bruises and cuts. Zabuza Mamachi. Shinsuke said in surprise as the group were now on edge seeing one of their main enemies right in front of them. Haku. What happened? Did you do this? Shinsuke questioned him, but he seemed off. He was looking at the floor in front of the group and there were wet stains over his bandages, seemingly from tears. They did this, the bastards killed Gozu and Maizu and beat Haku within an inch of her life. I couldn't stop them, they said it was the price of failure. Help Haku please. By this point the well-known proud swordsman had dropped to his knees with his eyes watering up while he clutched the broken form of Haku in his arms. Takiro and Naruto looked at each other while Shinsuke kept staring at the scene. What do you think we should do? They are the enemy technically. Takiro said in a hushed whisper, asking for his friend's opinion. Naruto shook his head before looking towards the rogue ninja. Izuna, Takiro and Shinsuke will be the only ones accompanying you to the bridge, don't worry as they are trustworthy. Izuna, scared and confused at the sight of Zabuza, could merely nod. Shinsuke and Takiro cautiously led the bridge builder past the swordsman before carrying on to the bridge. Naruto then turned his attention back to Zabuza, the man was a mess. He had heard stories of the demon of the mist, he never expected his first encounter with a man to be under such circumstances. Zabuza Mamachi, demon of the mist. If you would, please follow me. Naruto created 2 clones before turning around and leading the rogue ninja towards the house, his 2 clones positioned behind Zabuza in case this was a trap. Zabuza followed the boy, barely holding himself together. She spoke of you 3, you let her live despite knowing who she was and who she worked for, Zabuza said quietly and weakly, but Naruto heard. She was no threat to us. She gave us what we wanted, so we allowed her to leave freely. Naruto replied in a professional manner, without even looking at the man. Zabuza couldn't take his eyes off of the boy. He seemed young, maybe 12 years of age, but very sure of himself. Zabuza had trained Haku personally and she had told him that she stood no chance against any of them, even if it was a 1 versus 1 fight. Thank you for this, I don't want her to die thinking she was nothing but a tool for me to use. I found her begging on the streets, she was weak, but in her eyes I saw something rare these days, potential. She held a rare bloodline, but at the time the mist had been purging anyone with a bloodline, and her father tried to kill her. I took her in, trained her, and since then I have thought of her as family. Zabuza told the boy while glancing down towards girl in his arms. Naruto wouldn't tell the man, but he was shocked. The so-called demon of the mist could never truly be a demon, for demons could not care about any other being. This man, deep down, was simply a father hoping to protect his child. "We're here, Zabuza," Naruto said as they came to the home of Tezuna's family. Before they could do anything, however, the door opened, revealing Sakura at the opening of the house. The girl and Zabuza looked directly at each other, making eye contact. Aihiwa Sakura choked out before fainting on the floor. Naruto and Zabuza formed sweat drops on the back of their heads at the sight. Having heard the noise, Akami came running to the door and immediately saw his student with the A-rank missing ninja that terrorized Team 7. He looked back at Naruto seriously. "Naruto, I want an explanation, now." His student sighed while looking at his sensei. Kakashi had been putting the young Uchiha through torture with the excuse of trying to awaken the Sharingan. Deep down, Sasuke thought that this was payback for how he acted, or that Kakashi had been given a secret mission to assassinate him. The Jounin had been relentlessly beating down on the poor genin, causing small cuts and bruises to form over the boy's face. Sai had to hold back from laughing when he saw the sight. Sai had been working non-stop on the new jutsu that Kakashi had shown him. It was coming along slowly. He had been struggling with concentrating enough chakra and converting it, but he had slowly gotten better to the point he could now blow a couple of large branches from a tree. Luckily he had another full day of training, so he would hopefully improve on the jutsu in that time. The thought of facing an S rank had unnerved him greatly. He may be skilled, but he could barely take on a Chunin, so if one of these high-rank shinobi faced off against him, he knew he would die. Kakashi had the disappointed feeling he felt whenever Sakura did something pathetic, figuring she just made a fool of herself again. He shrugged and went back to torturing training Sasuke. With any luck the boy would awaken the Dojutsu soon. There'd be no use if the Jounin had to cripple the boy to get him to awaken it. Back at the house, Naruto and Zabuza had finished telling Akami about what had occurred. The Leaf Jounin was shocked beyond belief. "So, Zabuza Mamachi is asking for our help," he said with a raised eyebrow, not believing he had heard correctly. Zabuza sighed and lifted Haku before turning around. "Well, if you don't want to help, then I guess I need to rush to the nearest village with a medical ninja," he said sadly, feeling as if the Leaf Ninja was simply mocking him. Akami rolled his eyes. "I never said we weren't going to help, did I? Bring her in, I'll get to work immediately." Zabuza's eyes opened widely as he turned back around. Akami, seeing him just standing there, sighed. "Well, get to it. Unless you want her to lose any more blood." Zabuza quickly rushed into the house, gripping the girl in his arms. "Put her on the couch, please," Akami said to the taller man, who quickly did as he was told. "Naruto, bandages," he said to his student, who did as he was told and reached into his backpack. He pulled out a med kit before handing it to his sensei. Taking a deep breath, Akami placed his hands over the unconscious girl's abdomen while concentrating. Closing his eyes, his hands began to glow green. The room was filled with silence, Naruto and Zabuza quietly watching Akami do his work intensely. Minutes passed before Akami opened his eyes and began to stand up. Zabuza looked at him worriedly, praying that the girl was okay. Akami could see he wanted to ask how she was and merely smiled. "She'll be fine, just needs a day to recover and she'll be back to her usual self. She should wake up in the next few hours, bring her upstairs into our room. Naruto's clone will lead you there," the Jounin said, signaling Naruto to send a clone with them. The genin did as he was told, having not yet dispelled the previous two clones. One of them began to walk up the stairs, Zabuza eagerly following behind while happily clutching Haku's form in his arms. Akami then sighed and looked at Naruto. "Hope you have a plan of what to tell Kakashi." At the bridge the group had just arrived. It was extremely huge, despite only being half the size it needed to be. There were a large number of proud workers going about their daily duties, some cheered upon seeing Izuna. The old man relaxed a little before he began walking to the end of the bridge. The two genin followed closely behind him, looking around and seeing everyone hard at work. As they were walking, one man approached Izuna with a serious expression on his face. As Izuna was about to greet him, the man interrupted him by handing him his hard hat. Izuna gave him a questioning look, wondering what was happening. "Now Izuna, we have known each other for years and I respect you greatly, so I need you to hear this from me. I heard the Gatu hired missing ninja to stop you from building this bridge. Rumor has it that they were told to kill you on sight. I have a wife, she has kids on the way. I'm sure you can understand." And with that he walked past Izuna, leaving the bridge behind in fear of Gatu. Izuna growled in anger, throwing the hard hat to the ground in rage. "Damn you Gatu," he muttered under his breath. He attempted to ignore it by getting to work, although more and more workers were doing the same thing. He was losing men so fast that he didn't believe he'd ever finish this bridge, it was taking so damn long. He often found himself wondering if he was doing the right thing. His family had to be guarded by shinobi just so they'd be okay, all because of him and his damn bridge. Takiro and Shinsuke were looking around at everyone who had stayed, there weren't many of them, but they were all great men for sticking to their job instead of abandoning Izuna. As ninja they were raised to know that abandoning your mission can be just as bad as abandoning your village. Well, this may not be a shinobi matter, it was the same principle. Sighing, both boys decided to sit down and do what they were ordered to do, watch over the bridge and make sure Izuna comes back alive. Shinsuke looked down at the side of the bridge and into the water. It made him think of freedom, looking at the size of the ocean as it seemingly went on forever. Takiro left his friend to do what he was doing as he activated his Byakugan, making sure the coast was clear. He saw nothing out of the ordinary, choosing to relax for the time being. His mind began to wander as he thought about the upcoming battle. Is Uchiha on their side now? Everything just seemed strange to him. S-rank ninja are usually rare, but there are two of them in Wave of all places. Who were they? The young Hyuga was confident in his skill, but not foolish enough to underestimate a cage-level shinobi. Even their Lord Third was merely an S-rank shinobi, 2 would be too much for him alone, and he is the Hokage. Takiro was merely a genin on his first mission. At least they had Kakashi and Akami, although from what he can gather they are still only higher rank shinobi, but they are still strong. Unfortunately they had no other jounin or even chunin, and instead were left with a bunch of untrained genin. He couldn't think of any way they could win, but hopefully they'd at least survive. Backwards Uchiha, a few hours had passed and he hadn't taken his eyes off of Haku's form, not even to blink. He had worry in his eyes and couldn't stop himself from replaying the events that had occurred mere moments before Haku was rendered unconscious. The two cloaked shinobi had just snapped. Immediately Haku and the demon brothers jumped to defend Uchiha despite his shout to stop. He watched as they were slaughtered before his eyes and he couldn't do anything. The darker, taller one of the two had been pummeling Haku when Uchiha finally made a move out of sheer anger. He had fired 3 large water dragons at the two cloaked figures before filling the air with a thick mist and leaving with Haku in his arms. He had never been so afraid and he had gone toe-to-toe with a Mizukage in an attempt to assassinate the man. As he was internally watching it play over and over, he didn't notice the girl awakening slowly until she sat up. Uchiha looked at her with wide eyes. She noticed this and expected him to be angry at her for losing. Uchiha, I'm sorry, she was interrupted as he suddenly hugged her. They were there in peace for a few seconds until they heard a cough from the doorway. Well, isn't this touching? Uchiha turned to see Kakashi standing in the doorway staring at him with an untrusting eye. Kakashi had just returned to have Naruto tell him everything. Immediately he rushed up to the room. He didn't trust the man, they had fought after all, and he was working for a man like Gato. So the great demon of the mist came crying to his targets. What do you hope to gain, Uchiha? Kakashi had a cold tone to his words, which Uchiha noticed. Uchiha stood to face the copy ninja before surprising him by bowing. Kakashi was lost for words and had actually frozen in shock. Thank you, Kakashi. If it wasn't for your comrade Haku would be dead, so I owe you for saving her. Kakashi was tempted to use his Sharingan to see if the swordsman was deceiving him, but strangely enough he deep down believed that Uchiha was simply being sincere. Tell me what we need to go, then we will decide what to do with you. Kakashi said sitting down, Uchiha sighing while mimicking the copy ninja. Takiro and Shinsuke led Izuna back after a long day of nothing but building. It was boring for the two genin, but they didn't voice their complaints once. Nothing out of the ordinary had happened and they were ready to just get back home and rest. When they reached the door to the house they saw Sasuke and Sai standing next to a passed out Sakura. Sasuke had been severely beaten up and Sai seemed tired. Did something happen? Takiro asked himself before shaking his head. It was simply Team 7 being their pathetic selves. Team 7 quickly took notice of them, Sasuke glaring at them for unknown reasons. Sai noticed their questioning look and decided to tell them what was happening. Kakashi-sensei is currently interrogating the demon of the mist alongside Akami-sensei. Sakura appears to have been knocked unconscious by unknown means. Probably saw her ugly reflection. Sai said with his fake smile. The two Team 11 members had to hold back laughter at what he had called the pink-haired Kunoichi, even Sasuke snickered under his breath. Naruto then walked out of the house to greet his comrades. Hey, they are done now. Akami-sensei actually just sent me to get you too, let's not keep him waiting. Naruto, Shinsuke and Takiro then entered the building, leaving Team 7 and Izuna outside, staring questionably at Sakura's unmoving form. Around the table sat both of the Jounin senseis, Uchiha and a patched-up Haku. Akami smiled at his students before gesturing them to take a seat at the table. The three genin sat down and waited for one of their higher-ups to speak. Kakashi cleared his throat quietly. Uchiha has informed us of their hideout's location and a meeting spot with Gato. However, we cannot use these until the S-rank rogue ninja are dealt with. Akami then chose to speak up. Team 11, I need all three of you to be guarding the house on the day. Zabuza will be here with you for added protection, as we are unsure whether the Chunin will be the one sent here, but I think they will be. Me and Kakashi will confront the 2S ranks head-on, while Team 7 stand guarding Tazuna. Train, Tazuna can take a break tomorrow to spend with his family. Team 11 reluctantly nodded, not wanting to miss the bridge battle, but accepting their orders nonetheless. Zabuza and Haku looked awkwardly at the three students before both of them bowed their heads. Thank you, I would not be alive if not for your acts of kindness. Haku said thankfully, Zabuza remaining silent but showing his thanks through his actions. The three genin grinned in unison, not entirely knowing what to say in this situation. It's no problem really. Technically Haku isn't even a missing ninja, so she really wasn't the enemy. Shinsuke said while waving his hand in embarrassment, Akami letting off a chuckle at the sight. Get some rest you three, we've got a lot of work to do. Akami said dismissing his students as they went to their room to sleep. Tomorrow they would train for the day after, would be the biggest fight of their lives. The next day was a breeze, Kakashi taking Sasuke for whatever he meant by secret training, while Sai practiced his jutsu repeatedly. Sakura just ended up left at the house ignored. Team 11 were practicing from their scrolls once more, while Akami loosely kept watch on the house. Tazuna and his family spent the day fishing in their local lake, with a clone of Akami watching from a distance. Zabuza and Haku went off into the forest to train together, assuring the Leaf Ninja that they'd be close enough to track the Uchiha signature alone. It went by smoothly and at the end of the day everyone returned seemingly proud that their training had worked out well. Tazuna was visibly scared but trusted the shinobi he had hired for protection. His family were terrified, but he had assured them that with the help from the Leaf Ninja, she would be okay. It was now the day they had all been waiting for, the day they had been training for the last few days. Kakashi and Akami escorted the bridge builder and the students of Team 7 onto the bridge and instantly regretted it. The entire bridge was littered with blood and body parts. All of Tazuna's workers were dead and he had to hold back tears as he knew it was his fault. Kakashi raised his headband and revealed his singular Sharingan eye, while Akami removed a kunai from his pouch, both jounin on edge. The students of Team 7 circled Tazuna, with weapons at the ready, but they were all shaking, fear had taken over them. From the distance they suddenly heard an insane laughter, it was slowly getting closer and louder. Finally, some more fun. These guys barely lasted 5 minutes and wouldn't stop trying to run from me. You guys can play right. In the distance they saw a tall man slowly walking closer. He had silvery white hair and a large tri-bladed scythe on his back while wearing one of the cloaks that Haku had mentioned. Who are you and what do you want? Akami asked seriously, dropping into his stance slowly. I am Haiden. And I want the Uchiha. He said with a huge grin on his face. Sasuke suddenly froze in fear while looking at the man who was slowly approaching. Sasuke slowly lifted an arm and pointed himself, unable to speak. Haiden raised an eyebrow before suddenly bursting out into laughter. No, not you, the other one. Ah, too bad, it seems the Kakuzu won the bet, he won't last long. Kakashi raised an eyebrow at the words other Uchiha, not understanding what the rogue ninja meant by that. Sasuke instantly understood and gulped. Sai came to the conclusion of who it was. Tazuna and Sakura were left confused. Akami had the worst reaction however, as his face dropped into fear. He gripped his kunai knife hard as a single tear fell from his eye. Under his breath he sadly whispered. Naruto. Back at the house everything was silent, Team 11 were sitting at the table while Zabuza and Haku were upstairs. Tazuna's daughter was heading towards the table with plates of food when suddenly the door exploded into thousands of sharp splinters. A dark hand was in the place where the door once stood and it belonged to a tall green-eyed masked man. Team 11 jumped to their feet while Tazuna's daughter dropped the plates of food to the ground with a scream. The tall man took one look at the genin before his eyes fixed onto Naruto. The boys had taken up stances and were preparing themselves for a battle. Shinsuke and Naruto had removed their swords while Takiro dropped into the gentle fist fighting style. With a deep dark voice he spoke, intimidating all those present. So you are here. That makes the hunt easier, Uchiha. Team 11 looked at the S-rank shinobi in front of them in fear. He seemed to glare a hole right through them, freezing them in place. Naruto was the first to snap out of it, activating his Sharingan, the Dojutsu spinning instantly. Kakuzu seemed amused by this however, as he spoke in a mocking tone. A simple weak jutsu won't work boy. Are you going to come quietly, or will I have to break every bone in that frail body of yours? Naruto's eyes widened, but before the fear could kick in again he felt two hands on his shoulders. Gasping he looked back to see his two best friends looking at him before Takiro spoke in a confident manner. We have your back Naruto. He was shocked, but nodded. Shinsuke smiled in agreement before saying. Yeah, if one of us is going to die then we all will, gotta watch your back in the afterlife, right? Naruto had to resist the urge to laugh at his friend's words. Shinsuke was always the funny one. With newfound confidence, the students of Team 11 got ready to charge the S rank while Izuna's daughter ran up the stairs. Sighing, Kakuzu cracked his neck before staring down the genin in front of him. So be it. The three boys ran at the large man with above average speed, but it wasn't enough. Naruto jumped up swinging his sword towards the man's neck, but Kakuzu saw it coming and immediately threw a rock-hard punch which landed in the boy's jaw. Naruto's eyes widened in shock and pain as he was thrown with such force that he created a hole in the wall, falling in the ground just outside of the house. Shinsuke stayed low, but soon regretted it. Kakuzu jumped over the large blade, spinning in mid-air and landing a spinning heel kick into the Hazuki boy's chest, throwing him through the glass of the window. Akiro, seemingly unfazed by his teammates being literally thrown around like ragdolls, landed an open palm on Kakuzu's abdomen. He smirked realizing his hit landed, but it vanished as soon as he low-okayed up. The missing ninja was unaffected by the attack and just stood there staring down at the Hyuga. Akiro gulped as the tall man gripped his wrist before spinning and dragging the boy through the wall, throwing him into a nearby tree. Naruto had no time to recover despite being the first one thrown away, as when he opened his eyes, Kakuzu had appeared directly in front of him with a raised fist. Naruto rolled out of the way and when the punch impacted the ground, it caused the very earth to explode, kicking up dust and rocks. While rolling, Naruto pulled out some shuriken and threw them at the S-rank's leg and almost fainted when the projectiles merely bounced off of the man. As Kakuzu stared down at Naruto, a medium-sized water dragon crashed into his back, causing him to growl in annoyance as he turned around to see a charging Shinsuke with his sword raised. Vanishing, Shinsuke was suddenly sent flying back as Kakuzu appeared in the exact place the boy previously occupied, with an outstretched fist. Kakuzu was actually somewhat shocked as the boy burst into a shower of water, indicating that it was only a water clone. Impressive. Kakuzu said in his typical deep voice, but Team 11 chose to ignore him as they quickly regrouped behind the man. Kakuzu turned slowly, his glare unsettling the boys. I had no idea that you were so skilled, easily above genin. But you are out of your depth here. Suddenly a thick mist rolled in, taking everyone by surprise as it covered the area and blinded everyone present. Kakuzu growled, slightly wondering who had caused this annoyance. If you think they're impressive, you're going to love me. Zabuza's deep voice rang through the mist, seemingly coming from everywhere at once, and it held a somewhat demonic tone. Kakuzu scoffed as he dropped his cloak. Nobody could see what he was doing, but something black sprung from his back, curling up over his shoulder. It had a strange mask with markings, similar to an Anbu mask. A huge powerful burst of condensed air burst from the mask, somehow instantly clearing the mist. Zabuza was now standing in front of the boys, with Haku at his side. Everyone then noticed Kakuzu and almost puked in disgust. The man now stood shirtless and all over his body were stitch marks. His limbs seemed to twitch randomly as if they had minds of their own. A huge black mass of something hung over his shoulder. Everyone watched in horror as it slowly pulled its way back into his back, Kakuzu standing as if nothing was happening. What the hell are you? Zabuza said with a disgusted tone as he glared at the man in front of him. Kakuzu gave off a dark deep chuckle that unsettled everyone. I am often described as a monster, surely the demon of the mist can relate. He seemed to mock the swordsman, causing him to glare back in anger. Zabuza then slowly began to reach for his blade. Well, whatever you are, his hand reached the hilt of his blade as he gripped it tightly. Kubikurimch will tear you apart. He pulled the legendary blade from off of his back effortlessly, with Shinsuke watching in awe at the sight of one of the 7 blades in person. Zabuza suddenly burst towards the other missing ninja in surprising speeds for such a large man, appearing before Kakuzu with his sword mid-swing. Kakuzu's arms darkened ominously as he brought them up defensively. The large blade clashed with its target's arms, but surprisingly didn't cut through. Zabuza was shocked but began swinging again, not wanting to give his opponent any space to breathe. Kakuzu's arms stayed in their dark color as he used them to continue blocking the sword attacks. Pathetic. Kakuzu all of a sudden span around the swordsman, planting a hard kick into Zabuza's spine. Zabuza felt a crack in his back as he was sent straight through several trees. Before Kakuzu could follow him, however, he felt his feet begin to freeze in place. Looking down, he could see ice beginning to cover his feet all the way up to his ankles. As he began to pull his feet to move and cracking the ice, he felt more projectiles bounce off of him, only this time they were cold and left ice patches over his back. Turning, he could see Haku running towards him. Stupid girl, Haiden should have killed you faster. The ice covering his feet exploded in a shower of ice as he span and began swinging a fist towards the girl. Naruto suddenly appeared in front of Haku in a defensive position, taking the hit himself. The air left his lungs as blood shot out of his mouth. He was thrown back into the girl, sending them both to the floor as the missing ninja quickly followed them. He jumped and prepared to slam his feet into their skulls when suddenly a water dragon, accompanied by a wind-like jutsu, crashed into his chest. He didn't expect it and hadn't defended that specific area and as such was thrown back. He flipped in midair and landed on his feet. When he looked up he saw Shinsuke holding a hand sign while Takiro had an outstretched hand. He raised his fist into the air before bringing it straight down into the ground in front of him. The ground exploded, sending an earthquake-like tremor towards the genin and Haku. Naruto pulled himself to his knees with his sword in hand before charging it with an unbelievable amount of lightning chakra before he stabbed the blade into the ground with the lightning chakra impacting the oncoming tremor. Kakuzu was slightly impressed by the quick thinking of the genin. Genin don't usually learn of affinity strengths and weaknesses. However, he smirked. The tremor exploded upon clashing with the electricity, sending a shockwave that actually threw Naruto back once again, shouting in pain as his back hit a nearby tree. Haku watched as the boy was thrown away in surprise and concern, taking her eyes off of Kakuzu by mistake. The large man appeared behind her and gripped her by her hair. Shinsuke and Takiro lunged at him to try and intervene, but he jumped and brought both legs into each boy's chest. The power was a lot more than they were ready for as they felt themselves getting thrown backwards at unbelievable speeds. Kakuzu turned towards Haku, lifting her by her hair and causing her to scream. "It is time that I finish my partner's job," he said as he reached for her throat. She felt her throat slowly being crushed as her world slowly began to blur, going darker by the second. Suddenly a huge burst of chakra spiked behind Kakuzu. Thrilling intent filled the battlefield as footsteps were heard. Turning around, Kakuzu dropped the girl when he saw Zabuza. A thick purple aura covered the man as his eyes went bloodshot. "Don't." His voice was demonic. "Touch." His blade was in hand, seemingly weightless to the swordsman. "Haku." He suddenly shouted as he charged at Kakuzu. Kakuzu was surprised by the speed burst. Zabuza was slower before as he brought his arms up to block the sword. When they clashed, Kakuzu widened his eyes in shock. Zabuza's attack held more power than humanly possible, actually pushing Kakuzu back. Zabuza pulled his blade back as he span, planting a foot into Kakuzu's throat, which actually threw the man to the side. Zabuza began going through hand signs at a fast pace, bringing his hands to his mouth. Water style. Water vortex jutsu. A huge massive burst of water powered its way through Zabuza's bandages as he flew towards the S-rank missing ninja. The powerful jutsu charged towards Kakuzu at horrifying speeds, taking him by surprise as the water engulfed him. Naruto watched in surprise as Kakuzu hit a tree. It was that easy. Naruto looked closely with his Sharingan and at first he saw nothing, but then all of a sudden the Kakuzu in the water began to slowly melt into mud. Looking back at Zabuza he tried to warn him. "Zabuza." But it was too late. Kakuzu appeared behind the demonized man. He gripped Zabuza by the skull before smashing it into the ground. Zabuza's vision immediately began to blur from the hit as if gaining an instant concussion. Kakuzu did again before throwing him in the air and kicking him in the side. Naruto heard a loud crack as the hit impacted the swordsman. Ribs had been broken. Zabuza coughed up blood as he flew to the ground at the end of the clearing. He began to slowly stand, but Kakuzu wasn't allowing that. He threw a kunai knife that instantly pierced the swordsman's thigh. He dropped to the ground with a scream of pain, a blood puddle forming underneath him. Naruto crawled over to Haku and could see her trying to breathe desperately. Kakuzu had damaged her windpipe severely, but it wasn't life-threatening. Taking a deep breath he stood, with Kakuzu looking directly at his with a cold glare. Steel clashed as three figures blurred in and out of existence across the bridge. Kakashi and Akami were squaring off against the one calling himself Haiden, their kunai impacting his side. Haiden wasn't overly skilled like most S-rank ninja, but he was no slouch either. He was keeping up with two of the Leaf's best jounin and was laughing the entire time. Akami and Kakashi had landed a few small hits on the missing ninja, but no matter where the cuts were, he didn't seem to care or slow down. Sasuke and Sai could barely keep up with a few of the slower attacks, and the majority of the fight was unseen to their eyes. They suddenly appeared maybe 10 feet away from the genin. Akami and Kakashi trying to overpower the white-haired man's large side, struggling for an advantage. "What do you want with my student?" Akami said angrily, glaring at the man in front of them. Haiden simply laughed as he pushed his side harder, pushing the two jounin back slightly as he attempted to kick Akami, who moved to the side. "I'm getting bored. Hey you fucking idiots. Get the bridge builder." Haiden yelled before receiving a kick from Kakashi. Both jounin charged Haiden, swinging their kunai as he regained his balance and placed his scythe in a defensive position and blocking them both. Two figures appeared from over the side of the bridge, charging for the genin and Izuna. Sai removed his tanto and ran to intercept the first, while Sasuke sped through hand signs. Fire style. Phoenix flower jutsu. As Sai clashed his weapon against a rock ninja's kunai, 5 miniature fireballs flew over his head and headed for the second. He responded by bringing up a large earth wall to block it. As the earth wall dropped, the missing ninja wasn't expecting to see Sasuke right in his face with a kunai, which he blocked with a kunai in his face. He attempted to kick the last Uchiha, but he jumped over the kick while removing another kunai with his other hand and actually landing a slash on the rock ninja's shoulder. Looking up in surprise at the genin skill, he made eye contact and froze. In Sasuke's eyes were two first-stage Sharingan eyes glowing red as Sasuke smirked. Sai jumped back from his opponent before rushing back in with a quick burst of Chunin level speed and bypassing the rock ninja's defense, a small cut appearing on the rogue ninja's abdomen. Sai span and landed a high kick into the man's jaw, lifting him off of the ground. As he was in the air, he didn't see Sai sheathing his blade and pulling out a brush and paper with shocking speed. Super Beast Scroll. A large ink tiger burst from the page, chomping down on the ninja's torso. However, Sai didn't expect it to crumble into stones. A fist appeared from his blind spot, smashing into Sai's nose and throwing him back a few steps. The man before him held up a single hand sign while reaching his other hand into the bridge. With a small burst of chakra, he pulled back his fist and it was now covered in rocks, sharpened at the knuckles. Sai attempted to make distance, but the man's normal hand gripped his ankle and pulled him back, crashing the stone fist into the genin's chest. The rock ninja smirked with pride before the boy suddenly burst into ink, showing it was nothing more than a clone. Ink snakes appeared from nowhere and suddenly gripped his ankles as he heard a loud growl. He turned to see another ink tiger pouncing at him. He pulled back his stone fist, preparing to dispel the ink monster, not seeing Sai appearing behind him. As he was ready to throw his punch, Sai brought his tanto down and cleaved the man's arms off. The rogue ninja screamed in pain, but it was silenced as the ink tiger all of a sudden chomped down on his head. The white and black coloring of the beast suddenly gained some red in the form of blood as it pulled back with the head severed from the body and between its jaws. Sasuke was dodging each of the man's attacks while landing a few of his own. The rock ninja threw his kunai towards the boy's head, only for Sasuke to dodge to the side and slash his own kunai along the man's forearm. He tried to kick Sasuke, only for the last Uchiha to duck and throw one of his two kunai into the man's shoulder. The rogue ninja was bleeding more and more as the fight continued and attempted to make room between them, but the Uchiha gripped his wrist while spinning before driving his final kunai across the ninja's throat, causing blood to flow out at a fast speed. "You are no match for an Uchiha," Sasuke said coldly as he watched the man bleed out. They turned just in time to see the two Jounin thrown to the floor with Haiden looking down at them arrogantly. "Sasuke, let's use it now," Sai said as he began to go through the hand signs of his new jutsu. Sasuke agreed reluctantly as he too went through hand signs. Sakura saw that her senseis were now on the floor and Izuna was open. "It's up to me now, I am a shinobi," she screamed annoyingly as she stupidly ran towards Haiden, who could only watch with a raised eyebrow. The two leaf Jounin saw her run past them and attempted to jump up to catch her, but it was too late. Haiden smiled sadistically as he slashed his scythe across the girl's face, causing a large scar from her left cheek to her right eyebrow and making her scream in pain. Okami kicked Haiden back, while Kakashi gripped Sakura and jumped back to Izuna. Okami stood on guard as Kakashi checked over the girl who was screaming in immense pain. Haiden stood up laughing maniacally, holding his scythe to his face. His eyes were now bloodshot and his grin was so large it looked painful. His scythe held a lot of Sakura's blood as he seemed to sniff it, sighing in bliss. Okami then watched in horror as Haiden licked the blood. "Oh yes. Yes. Ha 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 ha." Haiden began laughing even louder as the air around him changed and an ominous feeling filled the air. His flesh began to turn pitch black as white skeletal markings began to cover him. Kakashi looked up and was confused at what he was seeing. Haiden began to draw a strange marking with the remainder of Sakura's blood. It appeared to be a circle with a triangle in the center. That's when they heard the two shouts in the distance. "Fire style, wind style. Fireball jutsu, wind breakthrough." Sasuke and Sai screamed, having just finished their hand signs at the same time. Sasuke expelled a huge fireball that burst towards the psychotic ninja as Sai sent a large amount of wind in the same direction. The two jutsu suddenly seemed to mix into each other, combining to create an even larger fireball of white-hot flames. The power and speed picked up dramatically as the superheated jutsu charged at Haiden, who looked it straight on. When the jutsu hit him, however, nobody expected what happened. Firstly, Haiden began laughing hysterically. The second thing to happen, however, was far more worrying. Sakura suddenly shot up from Kakashi's arm, screaming in pain as his skin began to peel off of her face. Naruto once more was sent soaring through the air after receiving another of Kakuzu's powerful punches. He had been enduring this for a while now and had bruises and blood all over his face, his shirt and trousers had even gained tears. Kakuzu's assault was relentless, he refused to allow Naruto to even try and defend himself. Shinsuke burst from the trees in an attempt to blindside the missing ninja. His speed was high enough to catch Kakuzu off guard as the young swordsman had removed his weights. He brought a large blade across the large man's back, across a mask with red markings. Bikuzu gasped in shock at what had just happened. Naruto noticed as the man dropped to a knee before recovering almost instantly and spinning. He caught Shinsuke by the throat and slammed him into the ground, choking the boy. Takiro appeared at the other side, but this time Kakuzu was ready and angry. The monster of a man reached towards the boy and his arm somehow disconnected from the rest of his body, held together by threads. It slammed into Takiro's face with more force than his other attacks. Takiro screamed in pain as he flew to the ground, his head hitting a rock and knocking the poor boy unconscious. He looked back down at Shinsuke as his arm reconnected with his body, clenching his fist, he then punched Shinsuke in the center of his face. Naruto ran at the man as he saw Kakuzu do it again. And again. Naruto could see blood pooling around his friend's head. Naruto screamed in anger as a powerful red chakra burst from his body in pure rage. Kakuzu was caught off guard. He began to stand up and turn to the boy. Naruto had changed into something else. His hair went more feral as his whiskers darkened. His fangs and claws grew longer and sharper as the boy hunched over onto all fours. The large thick red chakra covered his body and when Kakuzu made eye contact his eyes widened in shock. Naruto's Sharingan eyes had changed, replaced with a large slit in each of his now darker red eyes. Kakuzu could swear he saw a large fox for a few seconds before coming back to the boy. A single thought crossed his mind as he looked at the genin in front of him. Jinchuriki. The floor where Naruto was standing exploded as the boy vanished from sight, reappearing with a fist buried in Kakuzu's face. His eyes widened on either side of the fist as the power behind the punch threw him off of the ground. He was flung through several trees before Naruto appeared above him with both arms raised, bringing them down into the missing ninja's chest. Bikuzu coughed in slight pain before jumping to his feet. He raised an eyebrow when Naruto was nowhere to be seen until he felt it. Something crashed into his spine and as he turned his neck he saw Naruto momentarily before he once more disappeared. Appearing before Kakuzu he attempted another attack but this time Kakuzu dodged it and kicked Naruto in the abdomen. As Naruto was thrown away something rose from the ground next to Kakuzu. It had a half-white half-black face and what appeared to be a Venus flytrap on his shoulders. It had the same cloak that he originally wore when he showed up. Bikuzu seemed shocked to see him, although it was pretty hard to tell. "What are you doing here, Zetsu?" Zetsu simply began chuckling, its voice an odd mix of deep and light, as if there was more than one person talking. "You look like hell." Zetsu said, earning a cold glare from the masked man. Laughing it off he then began to speak again. "You are not to fight the Jinchuriki. We are not ready for that phase of the plan. Our leader has requested that you and Hyden abandon the mission right away and return. We can't afford to draw attention yet," Zetsu said before sinking back into the ground. Bikuzu sighed and vanished in a burst of smoke before Naruto could return, going to collect his idiotic partner and following commands. Naruto entered back into the area growling deeply, sniffing the air in hopes of finding his prey, with no luck. Sakura was in immense pain and no one could tell why. The genin had just landed a hit on the crazed rogue ninja and for some reason it was only Sakura screaming in pain. Kakashi ran through ideas in his head as he watched the flames clear from around Hyden. Looking at the ground he noticed something. Before Sakura got hurt Hyden drew that symbol in her blood. "The kami. It's a ritual, destroy the circle." He shouted to his partner, Hyden growling after realizing how quickly they figured it out. Okami suddenly flew towards Hyden in a burst of speed. Any damage he takes is transferred to Sakura. He informed Okami as the man jumped up and aimed a kick at the white-haired man. Wah Hyden said as a reaction as he dodged the kick and attempted to grip the jounin, who in turn caught his hand. They began trading punches and kicks, Okami having disarmed the S-rank ninja of his side. The attacks were fast, but that wasn't what was important. What Kakashi was watching was the feet. With every attack, Okami moved his feet across the ritual mark in an attempt to disturb it. "No. No, no, no." Hyden yelled as he felt the power fade. The markings suddenly vanished and Okami held up a single hand sign with a smirk on his face. The jounin suddenly began to glow before exploding in a burst of kunai and shuriken, which pierced the missing ninja several times. Okami then appeared next to Kakashi. He was lucky he did, because just as the attack ended another figure appeared. He was tall and tanned. He had a mask over his face and green eyes. They figured him to be the other S-rank shinobi. "Naruto, Shinsuke, Takiro, please be alive." Okami thought to himself as he stared down the one he thought to be Kakuzu. Kakuzu stared back but began talking to his partner. "Hyden, Zetsu has brought orders from our leader. We need to go now." Hyden groaned in annoyance but otherwise didn't talk. The leaf ninja looked confusedly at the duo, who simply stared back before disappearing in a burst of smoke. Clapping was heard at the other side of the bridge. As the jounin strained their eyes they could see a short chubby man in a business suit with a large army of armed men behind him. "Well done. Bravo. What a show this was," the short man said with a big grin on his face. "I just wish they'd finished their job, but at least I don't have to pay them." Akami and Kakashi glared at the large amount of men, and more specifically at the short man. They knew who this man was, he was Gato. They began to walk towards the large amount of men, limping slightly due to a little exhaustion. "What you did," Akami said coldly as his chakra began to flare to dangerous levels. It was unforgivable. Kakashi finished, his chakra flaring just as high as both Jounin began to flash through hand signs at extremely high speeds. Kakashi's hand began to spark up before a huge burst of electricity burst from his hand, scaring the mercenaries. Akami. The other Jounin smirked at his friend as he just finished pouring the last of his chakra into the strongest water jutsu he knew. Water style. Blast of the water god. The ocean began to rock with violent waves as the water began to rise in extremely high quantities. The mercenaries and Gato alike watched in fear as what appeared to be a lake's worth of water formed above their heads. The clone of Kakashi appeared next to him while gripping him before suddenly throwing him towards the large amount of water. While flying through the air, Kakashi poured the entire rest of his chakra reserves into his hand as the lightning burst almost 10 times more. Lightning blade. The jutsu touched the water and instantly all of the electricity transferred into the water, causing it to spark randomly across the water's surface. "Goodbye, Gato." Akami yelled before clashing his hands together and dropping the now electrified water onto the army of mercs, along with their rich leader. They all screamed in pain and horror as they were literally cooked by the jutsu combination. Gato begged for mercy, but all of them were silenced almost instantly. The two Jounin collapsed to the floor in exhaustion, that took far too much chakra. Sai and Sasuke escorted Izuna to the two Jounin, carrying Sakura over too. "Why does Kakashi-sensei always pass out like this?" Sai said, making Sasuke facepalm comically and Izuna to sweat drop. The world was dark around Naruto as he found himself in the familiar sewers. He began walking, feeling a large amount of chakra in a singular place and deciding to check it out. However, as he reached a large room he felt a hand on his shoulder. Turning around he saw a dark-haired man in maybe his mid-20s, with pale skin. He wore an Uchiha shirt and shorts, and what was more shocking was the twin Sharingan eyes he had staring at Naruto. "Hello Naruto, I am your grandfather." Naruto had his eyes wide open in shock from what he just heard as the man in front of him smiled kindly. Naruto suddenly activated his Sharingan in anger while staring at him. Opening his mouth he began to speak. "You are my grandfather. Where were you when I needed family? When I had nobody? Were you just camping out down here in the sewers enjoying yourself? You look far too young to be telling the truth." The man before him blinked a few times before laughing at Naruto, which only angered him more. "You have no idea where we are, do you?" Naruto shook his head as a confused expression took over his angry look. "I thought so. We are inside of your head, Naruto. As for your questions, I technically died long before you was born, I even missed your mother's birth. I sealed a piece of me inside of the Kyuubi before death and since then I have been watching through his eyes. When he was sealed into your mother I could resist the tears that escaped my eyes." He had a sad look on his face, but Naruto suddenly cut him off. "My mother housed the Kyuubi. And she is your daughter." The older Uchiha nodded at Naruto with a small smile. "Who was she?" Naruto asked quietly, not really knowing if what he was being told was true, but one could see the glimmer of hope flash in his eyes. The man chuckled before a soft kind smile that Naruto had only seen on a few faces appeared on his face. "Her name was Kushina and she was such a strong woman. I watched her grow, I watched as she went through the tough life of a shinobi and I saw her meet your father. Although I had never seen her as happy as she was when she found out she was having you." Naruto looked to the ground before looking back at the man with a serious face. "Who are you? If you are my grandfather I think I deserve answers." The man had to resist patting the boy's head as he could tell that Naruto would not like that at this moment in time. "My name is Izuna Uchiha, not many remember my name, but all know of my brother. See, he was regarded as being the strongest Uchiha and one of the strongest shinobi to ever live. My older brother was none other than Madara Uchiha." Naruto's eyes widened, Itachi had taught him about this man. Madara was the clan head and helped found the village, but when he wasn't named Hokage he began to rebel, eventually betraying the clan and being murdered by the first Hokage himself. Naruto looked at the one who called himself Izuna with a questioning look. "Madara died long ago, my mother would have been too old to conceive if what you were saying was true. You must be lying about either your identity or your position in my family." Izuna dropped his smile as his Sharingan intensified in the form of a glare. "Your grandmother was a powerful Uzumaki, a clan of seal masters. When she heard of my death she placed a seal over her own stomach to delay the pregnancy, and because Uzumakis were granted long lives, she kept the seal for years with no drawbacks to the child. She eventually gave birth years later, while also sealing her Uchiha blood away." Izuna said this in an angry tone, he hated that his own child never even heard of him and that the woman he loved hid her only gift that he could give her, lying about her heritage. Naruto had never heard of the Uzumaki clan, but he had heard of seal masters. Sealing techniques were among the most powerful and difficult ninja arts. They could do anything from teleporting a shinobi to any location, to even sealing a mountain-sized demon fox inside of a newborn baby. He couldn't question the fact that he definitely felt something from this man, their chakra felt alike, and his aura mixed with Naruto's gave him a calmness he had never felt from a stranger before. It was by pure luck that I ended up with your mother again, but she didn't believe me and refused to talk. She was stubborn, but I was happy with just being with your mother, whether she ignored me or not, it was the happiest time of my life, or should I say death. Then it happened. Izuna's face suddenly scrunched up in pain and anger as his Sharingan began to morph into something new. Rather than telling you, allow me to show you how your mother died that night and how you became the new Jinchuriki. Naruto's sight suddenly blurred before he suddenly found himself seeing a dimly lit room. Crying was heard, from a baby perhaps. As he looked around he found a group huddled up. On the table was a red-headed woman, she looked weak but happy. There were medics, and a blond man was standing there with his face for some reason blurred. In the weak woman's arms was a small child with the same hair as Naruto had. He watched as the medics began to take the baby while the blond man stood over the red-headed with his arms outstretched over her. Then bodies dropped and turning he could see a hooded figure with a mask. The mask had a singular eye hole, but Naruto could clearly see a Sharingan eye in there. The blond man rushed to action as the masked man threw the baby in the air before he managed to disappear somehow with the child. The masked man chuckled in a deep voice as he approached the poor woman who began panicking. Naruto watched as he chained her up and something began to pull itself from the woman's stomach, morphing into a giant fox. The fox went on a rampage as the blond man from before appeared out of nowhere before once more disappearing with the woman in his arms. Then he watched as the scene changed into a forest clearing as the blond man faced the masked man, eventually besting him and taking the fox from the man's control. The masked Uchiha fled and Naruto watched as the blond man brought the baby and the woman to the clearing and began going through hand signs. The fox seemed to panic and attack the baby, but the two adults jumped in the way and ended up impaled on the giant claw of the Kyuubi. He watched as the woman smiled at the baby before hearing the weak quiet voice of the woman. "We love you, Naruto." The world around Naruto changed back and he found himself once more in the sewers with Izuna. The blonde man he seemed familiar. Izuna sighed before looking at Naruto sadly. "That was the fourth Hokage, Minato Namek is Naruto, that man was your father." Naruto was in shock and began to freak out as Izuna closed his eyes. "The one in the mask killed your mother by ripping the fox out of her, and it gets worse. That masked man called himself Madara Uchiha. But by no mistake, that man was not my brother." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "This is a lot to take in. How are you sure it was not Madara? If he was so powerful then it wouldn't be too surprising if it was him and that he'd be alive still somehow," Naruto asked, not sure if this was all true or if Kakuzu had given him a major concussion. "For the short time we were connected I saw something, a memory of his perhaps, he knew your father on a personal level. That boy was on a team that worked under Minato and a familiar face for you was there too. The one you know as Kakashi was another student trained by your father, although he won't tell you that for an unknown reason." Izuna's Sharingan turned back to normal as he looked at Naruto. Naruto then remembered something. "I've been here before, but only for a moment. I felt a powerful chakra signature before I woke up, was that you?" Izuna chuckled before leading Naruto into the huge room he had stopped him from entering in the first place. At the end there was a huge cage door, but behind it all Naruto could see was darkness. "No, even I am not that powerful. Naruto, meet the monster that destroyed your village, the reason the idiotic villagers hurt you so much. This is the mighty Kyuubi." As Izuna stopped talking, a huge paw crashed against the metal bars, sending powerful winds across the room and shocking Naruto. "Finally the mighty Jinchuriki comes to see me, I have been waiting to meet you for years." The Kyuubi spoke in a deep demonic voice as its presence started to make Naruto sweat. The killing intent radiating from this monster was enough to make him feel sick, this was putting Kakuzu to shame. The beast's head suddenly appeared next to where the paw had impacted the cell door, its red slitted eyes glaring at Naruto. "Go easy on him Foxy, he's had a rough day." Izuna said as he stepped between the two of them with his Sharingan fixated on the Kyuubi. "I just showed him everything, so he has gone through enough." The nine-tailed fox growled at the ancient Uchiha, causing the man to smirk. "It has been nearly 100 years since you sealed yourself in me, and still if I got the chance I would shred your flesh." Izuna rolled his eyes at the fox's threat. The Kyuubi then looked at Naruto, this time with a little less hatred. "You interest me Naruto, you seem so calm while my power is causing you to go into a rampage in the real world." Naruto's eyes widened as he heard the fox say that. "How do I get back? I need to control myself before I do something unforgivable." Naruto said hurriedly, but the fox merely chuckled at the boy. In his anger Naruto flared up his Sharingan eyes and stared down the fox. The Kyuubi immediately stopped laughing and instead began growling aggressively. "You dare to show those cursed eyes to me? I'll rip you half." The demon fox immediately tried to break through the chains, the force of his attacks actually sending shockwaves of pure air at Naruto, which threw the boy to the ground. Come here and let me remove those eyes once and for all. The large sharp claw poked its way through the gaps in the bars and attempted to reach the boy, but suddenly a large burst of chakra flared up which silenced both of them. Looking to the side they both saw Izuna with a strange form of the Sharingan in his eyes, glaring down the fox. Do not threaten my grandson, beast. As if to emphasize his point, large spectral armor burst from the ancient Uchiha's body, taking the form of a giant spectral samurai. It was colored as a bright gold and held a giant blade in each hand. The giant fox immediately backed off from the bars of its cell with anger and what appeared to be slight fear in its eyes. Naruto was watching in awe at the power of the man before him, and this was a mere fraction before his death. But above everything else, he was interested in the man's eyes. They seemed familiar to him, but he couldn't remember from where. Not only were they familiar to him, but they seemed to radiate power and also seemed to fuel the large samurai of chakra. The armor then vanished as quickly as it came before turning to Naruto with the same eyes. It was great to see you, Naruto, but unfortunately it's time for you to go back, your friends are worried. Naruto suddenly felt a strong push as if something was forcefully removing him from his own mind. Naruto, he heard a voice, although it was faint, but he knew it as the voice of his friend Takiro. Naruto, please calm down. This time the sound was louder and the voice was that of Shinsuke, his other friend. They were calling him for some reason, it was confusing to him until he suddenly re-entered his body to feel nothing but anger around him. He seemed to be coated in some kind of red layer of chakra and his features seemed far more feral. Looking up he saw the battered forms of his friends from injuries sustained by Kakuzu's relentless onslaught. He tried to speak but couldn't, it was as if he wasn't in control of his own body. In the back of his head he could hear the dark chuckling of the Kyuubi. What am I going to do? Naruto asked himself as he felt his hand being lifted as his friends approached. Run. Don't get closer. He screamed in his head but knew that they couldn't hear him. His clawed hand was now above his head and he could feel a large amount of aggression targeting his two friends. Please run. Naruto's arm began to lower at high speeds and he felt all hope was lost until he heard it. We love you, Naruto. That voice. It was his mother's voice, it filled him with happiness and with love. It seemed to awaken something in Naruto and his eyes suddenly opened wide, the fox slits becoming Sharingan eyes. With an internal scream Naruto felt the power that had taken over him begin to weaken as he channeled his own chakra through his body. Takiro saw the oncoming attack and attempted to brace for, but it never came. Naruto looked at his friends happily and they could see what seemed to be tears in the corner of his eyes as he collapsed to his knees. His friends rushed to his sides hurriedly before helping the exhausted boy up. He suddenly realized that they had seen everything. They now understood. They had seen that he was in fact a demon. He began to feel fear that they would leave him, that he would go back to having no friends. These were the only people he had that he would call family. Then something shocking happened. Shinsuke looked at Naruto with his typical sharky grin before saying. Holy shit, Naruto. You were awesome. We woke up to see you hitting that masked guy around like a freaking pinball. Takiro nodded with a slight chuckle. Now we know what makes you different, Naruto. I have my seal, Shinsuke has his teeth, and you have this powerful red chakra. I guess we really are outcasts, aren't we? Naruto felt something wet on his face. He was crying, they didn't fear his power or his burden. Eyes, I have to tell you something, I have the nine-tailed fox sealed inside of me, Naruto said slowly, expecting a bad response, but what he got almost made him die laughing. Shinsuke turned to him with a childlike expression while saying. Oh, that's what that seal is on your stomach, I thought it was to stop stomach pains or something. All three boys began laughing together as they limped back to what was left of Izuna's house in unison. As they arrived they could see both Haku and Zabuza resting against the wall of the now broken house. The swordsman had lost the bandages around his face and it revealed his surprisingly normal face. He did however have the shark teeth like Shinsuke. He also had a large wound on his leg from where the kunai knife struck him. Haku seemed relatively fine apart from the bruises and slight cuts she sustained from the beating she endured from the S-rank missing ninja they all faced. Upon seeing them Zabuza began to laugh with his deep voice. You're alive. Heard you sent that S-rank jerk running, good job kid. I'm surprised you survived, he was too strong for all of us together after all. Haku said, while looking over the three boys for any serious wounds. Naruto looked at Shinsuke and Takiro before smirking slightly. Let's just say I used my trump card. While both Haku and Zabuza were curious as to what this trump card was, they had no time to question Naruto as all of a sudden Akami burst through the tree line with Kakashi, Sasuke and Sai behind, and they were carrying what looked to be the charred form of Sakura. What happened? Are you three okay? This was my fault. Akami said in a panicked tone, looking depressed at the thought of putting his own students in danger. If only he had been here.